It's 7 o'clock.
Yes, Mayor. It's 7 o'clock. Mayor Mansfield.
Yes.
Sir.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our workshop of May 31st. Looks like everybody is here. We have Nicholas Ward-Willis, our attorney, online, and I believe the mayor may also be joining us remotely. Is that true? Possibly.
He may be trying to get on. I know we just resent him the link.
Okay. So the mayor may be here. I am filling in for him this evening in person. And do I have to do a notice of meeting location?
No,
that's
you're good.
Okay, the first item on the agenda this evening for the workshop is appointing Daniel Fennell to the position of motor equipment operator. Chris, could you tell us about that?
Yes, so we had a member of our staff resign about 3 weeks ago, leaving open a motor equipment operator position. Our superintendent of streets and our HR director interviewed a number of people, and they thought that Daniel was the strongest candidate for the MEO position. He's currently an employee with NISDOT, and he has a commercial driver's license and all the experience we're looking for. So we'd like to backfill that position because we have a busy summer.
Yeah. That's great. Does anyone have any questions about that appointment?
No.
Okay.
Okay, on to the next one. Ratifying Zachary Monroe to the City of Beacon Fire Department. Chris?
As you may remember in the charter, it requires the council to ratify any new volunteers to the fire department. So we fortunately have another person who wants to volunteer, and this is a simple ratification that we'd like to bring next week.
And I'll just say that, you know, over the last 13 years that I've been on the council, the amount of volunteerism relative to the fire department has gone significantly down. And it's great the last few months that we're seeing additional people stepping up. And it's not an easy task to do. And it's a big commitment on their part of their free time and personal time. So
yeah, and I give the chief credit for continuing that because it is harder to attract volunteers. And we've now attracted 4 just within the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, that's amazing. So obviously we thank all those who step up and volunteer. Thank you, Chief. Okay, third, is probably the biggest one on our agenda this evening, is a presentation of the 2023 to 2027 capital program. Chris and Susan Tucker and various department heads will be filling us in on these future hopeful expenditures.
Okay, well, I'm going to kick off briefly and then turn it over to Susan Tucker, our Director of Finance. We also have 6 of our department heads with us this evening to run through their respective parts of this program or plan. You'll hear it referred to both capital plan and program in the charter, actually program. And every year we're supposed to present to the council by May 31st a draft plan or program and then adopt it by July 31st. So Sue will walk through some of the steps. I just wanted to let you know we do 2 budgets a year. You have an operating budget that we do by the end of each year that covers our normal expenses the following year. That's things like labor and insurance, supplies, materials, things that are done on a recurring basis. Then we also do the capital plan, which is our program, which is things that assets and equipment and buildings, property acquisitions that have more than a 5-year useful life. So you have things like dump trucks or a new roof that lasts 25 years. The way the 2 budgets intersect is that once you adopt your capital plan and you begin taking on debt to fund that capital plan, there's an item in your operating budget to pay for the financing of that. So that's the way these 2 budgets, and I'd like to explain that for the public because they're going to hear about a budget later in the year and they might say, well, didn't we just do the budget? So these are the major capital items, and what we've done is we've asked all of our departments to prioritize what they need, particularly next year, but also extrapolate out the next 5 years. And what you have before you is broken down. I'm going to do a couple of the items, and then the department heads will do that. I want to note that some of the prior things that you and other councils have adopted have been done recently. So when you saw the roof get replaced and the copper on the dormers, when you saw Main Street get repaved, or a new chiller out there that's now cooling the building, those were all in prior adopted capital programs. And so there's still things that are pending that were approved some years ago, and we're working through them. Again, this is kind of an aspirational plan. We'd love to be able to do all of the things that we're going to approve, and oftentimes it takes a little bit longer than when we think. So with that, I'm going to ask Sue Tucker to walk us through some of the process and particulars about this.
Yeah, Sue, before you start, just add one thing. So, and I'm sure Sue will say this as well, but the first year is pretty good set of numbers, right? Because they're probably going to happen. And then as they get further out, the numbers are more estimates or aspirational, right? I just want to point that out.
And that wasn't in Sue's talking points, and she didn't just kick me because you did that.
Sorry, Sue.
It's fine. It's fine. Chris likes to steal my thunder too. So what we've given to you is a draft of the 5-year capital plan, which is spanning 2023 to 2027. This is a conceptual plan for the next 5 years of replacement and improvement to our assets, as well as the new assets. And as Lee had mentioned, we're really going to focus on the 2023 year. In the coming weeks, we'll determine if this is an agreeable plan, and we'll need to adopt it by July 31st. In conjunction with that, we'll also bring forth a funding plan for the 2023 year. Funding will include grant funding, funding from fund balance, and whatever can't be used from those sources we would bond. Each year, we will be presenting a new 5-year capital plan. So for instance, in the next couple of years, you will have a new 2024 to 2028 year, with the focus being on 2024. Each year will be updated as new priorities arise and project statuses change. So the process is, in early April, we asked the department heads to review their assets and research costs of new acquisitions that they needed to make. We met with each department and reviewed their request and discussed the priorities of asset replacement and or new assets. During this phase, we review the estimates of costs and escalations in costs for each project, and we put it in the current year or future year. We discuss the priorities of replacements or the need for a new asset, such as new technology may come out and it may be a cost savings to the city, so we might add that into this plan. We will then prepare a draft capital plan and present it to you, just like we're doing tonight, and we'll need to publish it and hold a public hearing and then adopt it by July 31st. During that time, we will research and present a funding plan for the 2023 budget. I will calculate the amount of fund balance or prior year savings that can be transferred from the operating funds into this plan to fund a portion of it. We are continually researching and trying to secure grants, but in this capital plan, we'll have more of a firm idea of what grants we're absolutely getting. And then the third piece is we'll see what we need to do, that we need to bond. During that phase, I will review the debt limits, the current rates of financing, and the timing of potential bonds and the impact that would have on the debt service of the operational funds. If we adopt the capital plan and we adopt the funding plan, we prepare resolutions, which is bond authorizations for those plans. We can't spend any money until those bond authorizations are done for those that are going to be funded with the bonding. After that our process, we would go out to bid an RFP on projects. Once we do that piece, and this starts bringing you into the fall, so you see the timing of how this all happens. At that point, we'd award the winning bidders in our, the RFP who we've selected. We would enter into contracts with them, approve those contracts here, and then we would prepare for purchasing and construction in the spring. So it's important to get all, the bidding underway, especially. We can't go out to bid next spring for projects that are going to happen in the summer. Most of the contractors have all their projects lined up. So that's sort of the process of the flow of information. So with that being said, did I miss anything?
No, I think you did great.
Okay. With that being said, we'll start with the biggest project on the table, and Chris is going to discuss that, and Gary's here as well to discuss the firehouse renovation at Lewis Tompkins.
Before we get on to specific
Sure.
projects, I just want to focus on this idea that if it's not in the capital budget, capital program, and cannot, and requires bonding, it first needs to make it into the capital program before we can do it.
It actually doesn't. If something were to arise and we wanted to bond it, say, and we decided here that we wanted to do that, no, we'd draw up an authorization, we'd approve it. It might need a public meeting, but we could go forth on something like that. It doesn't happen this isn't the absolutely only time it can happen.
Okay, great.
Like, it's more of a guideline. A budget is a plan, and
Right.
you oftentimes have to adjust your plan based on what you find out. We might be getting bids back that are extraordinarily high, and we would have to adjust our numbers, or we might have to adjust our timing.
Right, so determining the priority of what we're working on.
Great. And then conversely, if there are things on here that we feel like we haven't had enough time to understand whether or not we want to prioritize it with our city money, is now the time to do this as part of this several-week process, or is that something that can wait until the budget season or some later point?
You would want to try to do it before the July 31st adoption.
Yeah.
Whether you're pushing it out of a year or determining it's not a need for the city.
And I would just add, there's a couple things. The main, as Susan and Lee both talked about, next year is really the hard and faster one. Those are things we really think we're going to get done in 2023, or that we need to get done. The other things, some of them are placeholders. You'll see we put in $5 million for a community center because I don't have enough information at the moment to know what that is and then what the cost is. So I just put it on the capital program so that we know it's pending, we know it's out there, and we know that we'll develop further cost estimates on that once we know, is it one site, is it dispersed sites, what's the square footage, what's the cost?
So the funding plan would really determine what we're really doing in 2023. But if it was there was engineering on a project and you didn't want to go through the project, obviously we wouldn't go through with it in 2023.
And if you see something that's not on there, like I think there should be X at this park, or this should be moved up, we can have those discussions. What we've tried to lay out is a realistic plan for moving forward over the 5 years that doesn't tip us over on too much debt. And Susan and I are both aware that in 2024 some of our debt load comes off because we've paid off those bonds, and then in 2025 another round of debt comes off, and that it's like you made a major payment down on your credit card. It gives you the ability to spend more. So if we do move something up, we may then come back and say, well, we'd probably have to move this back a couple of years.
Yeah, I can imagine there might be some items on here where it's useful for myself and maybe others on council and the public to know, like, what are kind of items that actually are relatively easy to get grants for, whereas what are ones we have to bond, because that helps make some priorities and decisions potentially.
We'll give you an overview of which ones we expect grants for as we go through.
Great, thank you.
So with that, maybe I'll jump in with the firehouse and ask Gary Van Voris, our chief, to come up. Gary can give just a little bit of a overview of what we're doing, and then I'll dig into the numbers and the breakdown.
All right, thank you. So good evening. As you can see on there, the only request tonight is for the fire station renovation, which is a big request. It's request been going on for a very long time. And the city administrator and the financial director, they're going to explain the financial components of this request and how we're going to do that. But I'd like to give a little history about some of our items that we do with a capital. Like our fleet, you know, anything for emergency service is very expensive. Our fleet of apparatus, this year we have 3 frontline pieces of apparatus and 1 reserve. But last year we had more. We reduced our fleet from 5 to 4. And an apparatus, a fire truck, ladder truck, the average life age is 15 to 20 years, depends on the uses, this and that. And this is how we come up with replacement. The other department heads will be doing the same thing. We have to determine the life of apparatus. Now, one thing, but good thing is news, that you won't see any future replacements. We're in good shape. That's my plus about tonight. And any emergency service equipment, the chief will tell you this too, is very, very expensive. Example, like my portable I have tonight is $3,000 and up. These are 20 years old in the fire department. But, like Susan talked earlier, we look for resource them. You won't see that on a budget request because I know going through our fire chiefs meetings, in 2 years, the county's coming out with $5 million to help emergency service replace their portables on that. So with that, we try, not just me, the other department said, we try all the revenues that we can to purchase items. We explore federal and state grants, and sometimes we receive funding through our local and elected officials. That's just a little synopsis of what we do at the fire department on that. So now, administrator and the financial, they're going to go over the components of this fire station.
Great, thanks. So you'll see in the capital plan that we're proposing $760,000 for 2023. You had, prior council had authorized funding for the design and assessment of the firehouse consolidation, going from 3 firehouses to 2, and now from 2 to 1. As part of that, we had some funding left over, and this is the delta, the variance of what we need to complete the design this year of the firehouse. And you had that presentation about 6 weeks ago from our architect, Bob Mitchell. They've already been out working on the investigations necessary for that project, like geotechnical borings. Then in 2024, this is the estimate for construction and construction inspection, and also hiring an agent to be our clerk of the works. So again, this is an estimated number. It could go up or down, but it's the best that we have based on the information today. This is your largest item that you're going to have in these next years, and we do believe that this has been queuing up for 15 years of studies. We think it's necessary for the evolution of the department, and frankly, as the chief said, a lot of the other assets have already been updated. We're in a good place with the fire department, and this really is the next logical step. The other major project that we have pending, a lot of people noticed the repaving of Main Street. One of our other major arteries, Fishkill Avenue and Teller Avenue, from Wolcott Avenue to Main Street and Main Street to Prospect at the Fishkill border, that 1.7 miles is going to be fully rehabilitated using federal funds. So in this case, we're authorizing money, but we know that 95% of it is likely to come back to us. 80% federal, 15% state. Now, there's a little bit of a gap between what was approved previously and updated estimates, but we're working diligently with the state and county to identify and secure those funds. So you'll see we're asking for another $1.99 million, but again, the context for that is 95% of that comes back to us once we do the project. What we hope to do is finish right-of-way acquisition this summer. We're down to 5 right-of-way acquisitions out of about 36 properties that we needed. Those are mainly due to us adding sidewalks on both sides of Teller and Fishkill. So the whole run is going to have sidewalks. It will have a raised crossing at Memorial Park. In fact, I think there's 2 in the plan. We've already moved some of the telephone poles. We also have sewer work in Fishkill Avenue and adjacent Hannah Lane that was previously approved in a capital plan. We'll be putting that out to bid probably in the next 2 weeks and trying to get that done so we don't have to dig up the road again for a while. So these are two really large projects that we're going to be doing over the next year. Our team is spending a lot of time right now on these projects, just trying to get them to bid and through design.
Chris, just a quick thing. Do you want us to ask questions at each item or at the end? Like when we're discussing each item, should we ask our questions?
Why don't we do it at the end of each person's presentation?
Great.
You want to do that? So, and then with fire, I also want to note that we are going to need things like a thermal imaging cameras, SCBA, which is self-contained breathing apparatus. We didn't put that in here because we think we have grants that we're getting for that. So we've applied to the county. And we can flex the timing based on whether or not we get those grants. The same with the portable radios. Those will work great for a number of years. If we get the grant, then we would replace. So any questions you have on my part or Gary's?
I just wanted to confirm, so the plan that we have here, we're breaking ground on Tompkins Hose in 2024?
No, we would design this year, and we'd like to break ground in 2023. The payment for that won't start to kick in until 2024. So if you put it in the capital plan, we can do a bond anticipation note, but most of the cost will be towards the end of 2023.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there's a little bit of a lag, but our intent is to break ground next year, and then it's about a 14 to 16 month project.
Okay, but we're able to, so of that 9.7 million, we're able to pay those bills in 2023. This is just when we're on the hook for making payments towards that. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we can use fund balance, unallocated fund balance, and then we'll wrap this into our financing in 2024.
Thanks. Road reconstruction, should we wait for other people to ask their questions about the fire department before we talk about road reconstruction?
You can do road reconstruction, why not?
I just wanted to clarify, you were saying there are a couple of potential capital items that would come up in 2023 but would have grants associated with them.
Yes.
And I just wanted to clarify, because there are some other items in here that might have grants associated, are you making a distinction between funding that comes from grants versus funding that comes from like the federal or state government?
No, this is
Okay.
a gross cost right here. This doesn't reflect any of the funding sources or the delta yet.
Uh-huh.
When we give you the funding plan, you'll have the gross cost and then what we expect in federal, state, local sources, any grants that we may come upon.
But I did make it, you are catching correctly the exception that I didn't put the thermal imaging and SCBA. The
Right.
reason for that is if I get the county grant, we'll go ahead with that. If not, I would put it out some years. And we
Okay.
really wanted to keep the fire department request to the principal thing.
Right.
We haven't done that elsewhere, and I'll tell you where. The other places that we mostly have grants are like the Veterans Place Park, the Bridge Street Bridge, of course, Teller Fishkill Avenue. It's more a reimbursement than a grant.
We're also a little bit further along in getting those grants on some of those projects, so we know that we can move forward with this.
But you're
Got it.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is that there are some projects that are going to be funded only if the grant comes through, or at least funded in this
In this
particular
timeline,
that
yes.
we're talking about, only if the grant comes through, and those are not included here unless the grant is already secure. That makes sense.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then you had other questions about road.
Well, so there's been a plan circulating in Beacon since, I think, 2007 or 2008 to rehabilitate Spring Valley. I can share with you the engineering documents and the letter from Lankin Tully, but George and I briefly spoke about it before this meeting, and you thought maybe the sewer had been done.
I know significant sewer work was done on Spring Valley at the time. It was, as far as I remember, fact, I think I started the Spring Valley Block Association
Oh, yeah.
back then, and we advocated for this plan to be done. So I think most of the infrastructure was done. It's more of the cosmetic stuff and the sidewalks and road that has.
So if you're done with fire questions, maybe I could ask Mickey Manzi, or Superintendent of Streets, and/or Ed Balicki to address Ed Balicki. He just put his finger on his nose, so I guess.
Yeah,
it's you.
if I could just quickly add that some of the stuff that's left to do may seem cosmetic, but there are issues on Spring Valley where the elevations of the sidewalk and the curb and the road become very fluid, and the sidewalks are inconsistent. And what happens is people are parking where there should be a sidewalk, so the sidewalk gets interrupted by a car, and then, I don't know, it's a little unsafe, and
Okay.
maybe I can just send you everything.
Yeah, if you send it to me, I'll vet it through the team, and we'll see what we can do.
So just say some of the questions what George brought up predates, and Dan brought up predates my time here with the city. Sorry. But we have done some significant sewer work on there. We did some of the sewer replacement during the I&I work that we've done, and then we had actually an emergency repair on Spring Valley, on where the intersection of Spring Valley and Union is. There was a significant tree growth. The roots had infiltrated the sewer line, blocked it up, was creating a backflow, back pressuring our system, and we did a significant repair there. So there, not the full reconstruction, but we have done sewer work in that area.
But that full executed plan is somewhere, maybe Dan has a copy of it, but
Yeah,
it is on the shelf
I would
somewhere.
appreciate you
Anthony,
forwarding a copy, and
Yeah.
and let me see if it's something that's actionable. We can try to incorporate it
Yeah,
in the
and
plan.
just in the spirit of adding things to the plan for later years,
Yep.
so that we don't forget them. That's really why I'm bringing it up. I'm not saying this needs to be 2023, but I know that this plan had been around, and some of the problems mentioned in the letter still exist. So
Okay.
maybe we could just have it in there as a,
Great. No, and that's why we're doing this. So please mention those when they come up, and thank you.
I just have a general question. It applies to the fire department as well as all the other, and there's a lot of vehicles being requested and so on. Is there any resale value to the existing ones, or the ones that we're getting rid of that have been outdated? Or-
It depends. We get good resale on our fire vehicles. Gary got a great price for the rescue pumper that we disposed of when we bought the new, actually, it was a rescue. All right. And I think we got $150,000 back on that. So that helps defer the cost of the fire truck that we bought. In some cases, some of the cars aren't so valuable. Like we have old Chevy Impalas that are coming out of the rotation for the police department. Those don't have a lot of value left because they've been very well used.
Right.
So it really depends on the equipment. And we try to find the balance point between buying new equipment. We do have mechanics on staff. We have 3 mechanics who take care of all of our diesel and non-diesel equipment. And you try to find the balance point at which, if we kept this equipment longer, the cost of parts and labor and having that equipment break down is now so much that you really just need to invest in a new piece. So we try to get those last few miles out of all of the vehicles, and knowing that there's that trade-off if you
Right.
hold on too long.
And just kind of triggers another question, unrelated really to this, but as we sort of morph into more hybrid or electric vehicles, are our mechanics keeping up? Will they be able to maintain those fleets?
They have so far.
Yeah.
You may know we have a lot of the police vehicles are moving to hybrid, so all of the interceptors that you see are hybrid gas vehicles. We've been moving towards fully electric vehicles. We have one now in the detectives department, and then Mark Price has a plug-in hybrid over at the rec department. So we think they'll be able to do that. Of course, they continue to train. We have sent them for training on other pieces of equipment, and as necessary, we'll update that. Luckily, the phase-in is slow enough that it's not like 90 new cars that are EVs in the first year. We're bringing on 1 or 2 a year as they are commercially available and they are dependable enough to use.
Yeah, a friend of mine he's taken over at the bike shop, and he's an old school bicyclist. And most of the people that are coming into the bike shop are electric bikes. So it's a whole different mindset, and it's a whole different
Yeah.
knowledge base.
And along with the skills to fix them is our charging infrastructure. So we will be putting 2 more charging stations in this year from a grant we got several years ago.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
That George's question leads into, and Chris's answer leads into my first item, which is our jet truck that you see on our capital plan.
So Ed's going to just jump ahead.
I am going to just jump ahead.
Ed, you don't get to go home if you jump over Mickey
It
here.
was,
He's on page 3, Water Department, Water Funds.
so the jet truck is it's a truck vehicle that we use for cleaning our sanitary sewer system. The current vehicle is a 1989 International chassis. The working parts of it that clean the sewer, the company that originally manufactured those parts is no longer a business. They've been bought and sold and petered around. As Chris mentioned, actually our mechanics have had to fabricate parts for it at times to keep it usable for us. So at this point, and earlier this year, we had to replace the rear end on it, so it's really exceeded its useful lifespan. So that's why that vehicle, we were tossing back and forth between that and our vac truck, which I believe, if any of you have seen, it's a truck that's pretty much a large vacuum that we use for excavating purposes. There's been some electrical issues with it, but due to the issues with the jet truck, we felt that was more of a priority to get that vehicle replaced. And then moving on, we have our Mount Beacon tank, which is located at the Pocket, which, and going back to what Chris had touched on earlier, we have multiple projects that were already approved. I'm sorry, speaking too fast. That were pre-approved, and that are already ready to go for construction. Mount Beacon and Pocket rehabilitation is one. West Main Street Pump Station and Forest Main. West Main Street is a sewer pump station located right before the entrance to Metro North. That's a 4-phase project. These are the last, this is items 3 and 4. Number 1 was the Headworks project at the sewer plant. Number 2 was the North Interceptor. And now 3 and 4 is the Forest Main and Pump Station. So we work with Metro North to acquire an easement for the property adjacent to the current pump station where we're going to build a new one. We just recently completed all of our geotech, and the pump station is about 80 to 90% designed. The Forest Main has been designed. So we should be going to regulatory agencies hopefully within the next month or 2 for them to review and approve the project.
And just to give some context, the reason Ed is talking about things like forest mains, which are sanitary sewer, is because he not only deals with water, the water supply, purification, and distribution, but also he deals with all of the infrastructure that collects our wastewater and brings it to the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you. And then again, Chris touched on this earlier, Fishkill Avenue and Hannah Lane. We started working on that several years ago ahead of the Fishkill Avenue project. We've been working with the Condo Association at Hannah Lane to readjust our easement through the property to accommodate the new sewer mains so we get proper separation between the sewer and the water in that section. And we believe that easement will be signed shortly and we can get that project out to bid. So we have multiple big projects that are in the pipeline that are already approved, and we feel pretty confident getting them moving forward.
And you just approved a contract for Doyle at the last voting meeting, and that was for the Mount Beacon and Pocket Dam. So that will get underway shortly.
I didn't understand the bit about the Hannah Lane project. That's not in here.
There was a previous project,
Oh.
I believe 19 or 20, I apologize.
Okay.
I'm not sure which year it was approved.
There's sewer replacement in Fishkill, under Fishkill Avenue, and adjacent Hannah Lane.
Got
And in
it.
order to do both of them, we needed an updated easement. So it's already been authorized, but that again is that lag between, okay, it was authorized 2 or 3 years ago, and now we're ready to strike on
We
it.
also ran into, like on some of the other projects and some stuff that we had already planned, we also ran into the pandemic, which kind of backlogged and put a hold on some of the projects. We had one, again, scheduled for 2020, which we'll discuss a little bit later on, as I believe my next item after the Capitol is we have a meter upgrade program that was approved, and we're kind of ready to kick that off as well. And then moving forward, we have our Mount Beacon tank, which I started with, is located at Pocket Reservoir. That's our oldest water storage tank. It's still in operation. As my hope for that plan is to do full engineering and engineering packet, design packet, and approach for a grant for that project once we meet all the design criteria and engineering for it.
Is this the tank that we want to change the location of it, like raise it higher so that it has better pressure for the neighborhood? Is this the?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's the end goal.
I'm showing what I learned on Saturday.
Yeah. That's the end goal. Yeah. We'd have to design it within we have to design it within the footprint we have, and also work around our existing pumps that supply water to it. So we'd have to. I don't want to say be careful, but we have to make sure we manage what we're going to design to what we're actually able to pump into. If the pumps can't meet the head, then we'd have to do a full pump station upgrade as well. So I'm not saying we're trying to avoid that part, but we're trying to, if we don't have to, because the pump station was part of our SCADA. We just did a significant electrical upgrade there. But yes, that's part of it. And we're looking to, if you're facing Pocket now, this tank's on your left, we're looking to move it towards the right, up a little bit towards the bench area that we call it.
Cool.
And the one has to stay online while the other is constructed, and then we switch over. Once we decommission the other tank, Ed and I have also talked about trying to carve out a parking area for the hiking trails there. So that is on it's on the agenda if we can get there. There are definitely prohibitions against doing certain things next to the water supply, but.
Yeah, it's because like our water, there's a regulation now. Like as we make modifications or new installations, everything has to be fenced for security purposes. And it's like we did at Fairview Tank, and like Chris had mentioned, at Fairview Tank we were able to take that tank offline, demo it, and rebuild it on the same exact spot. But we can't do that at Pocket due to the fact that it provides pressure to certain areas.
There's no replacement for it.
And again, next is the Mount Melzinger Reservoir rehabilitation. Much like Mount Beacon, there's a spillway capacity issue there that was identified by our engineering firm. So as part of that, again, there is some aesthetics that cleanup of the shotcrete and some of the seepage that's at the reservoir. But the biggest thing is addressing the spillway capacity. Any questions? Let's keep going, or?
I would just say you previously approved the design. You'll see for some of the projects, they're so involved that we do a design phase or an architectural phase, and then we do construction the following year. And so you have previously approved Melzinga's design, which is almost done.
I'm saving my questions till
Okay,
the
all
end.
right, fine. And then again, well one investigation. It was part of. In 2018, we did a comprehensive water supply plan. As we've been going through, we tick off certain items, like the Pocket Reservoir was an item. This was another item that we found. We actually did a pump test where we started shutting off each source to identify like pumping capacities and hydraulics. We found that well one, the design and what it should be pumping isn't equivalent to what it's not pumping to what it should be pumping. There we go. Let me put it that way. So as part of the comprehensive plan, it's again to continue to look at our sources and to continue to upgrade them. And then the last item I have is the high lift pump. For those of you that did the tour of the plant, we have what's called the high lift room that pumps our filtered water from the water filtration plant to our main tank at Fairview, and then out to distribution. The plant is designed with 3 pumps and a 4th pedestal for expansion, so we want to take advantage of that expansion now ahead of any growth where we could add the redundancy to take the ease on the 3 pumps that are there now. Typically on any given day, there's always 2 pumps that are running, and in the event also is if one pump goes down, at least now we have an extra. We will always have like a 3rd on standby.
And I would just say you'll see these are all grouped by the fund. Like when we were talking about the firehouse, for people at home, that's out of the general fund, and that's where most of our spending is. And then we have 2 other separate funds, sewer and water. So all of this is paid for by the water fees and and then hopefully grants. We've gotten a number of grants here, and we'll be going after others. And
We
then,
have
and
a-
then the water we sell to the prison and to Fishkill.
Okay. As I understand from previous meetings, we have a purchasing agreement for water with town of Fishkill if we need it.
Village of Fishkill.
Village of Fishkill, thank you. Would any of these construction projects, do you see that they would result in a need to tap into that at all?
We purchase from them annually, so we
Mhm.
already use, it's part of our safe yield. So we look at how much water we have to provide to the residents, what we purchase from them is included in our safe yield. So it's something that we use regularly. We're just for everybody knows, we're currently not using it because our reservoirs are full. But as getting warmer and drier, as the reservoirs start to go down, especially when we start work on Mount Beacon, we'll take that offline and we'll supplement that water with the water from the Village of Fishkill.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood that we don't draw from that.
No, we do
Okay.
regularly.
But some of the projects help us conserve our own water here. For instance, the Pocket Dam was losing approximately 90,000 gallons a day through seepage.
Yeah.
And so when we redo the pocket, that's water that doesn't go out of our system so quickly, and then we're less reliant on these outside sources.
Yeah, we'll recapture roughly about a month's supply of water on the raw side, untreated water, by fixing up the pocket. Just that alone.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question for Susan about it's not
Sure.
necessarily about the water stuff, but it is kind of related.
No problem.
Is it in the finance plan, is there any point, and maybe it's during the finance plan, where we refer back to the prior capital projects and whether they went over or under, or we got grants and we didn't
We
think
don't generally go through that.
Okay.
We're still working through some of the 2020 and 2021 projects. We're currently doing them, and we haven't even spent $1 on some of them.
Got it.
So there's approximately $2 million that I could issue this year for projects that we're currently doing, like the roof. But there's $8 million of projects that are on hold or maybe coming down the pike. So but those are already authorized. But we generally don't come back in with a project that's over or under. They're almost always under a little bit. We do a pretty good job of estimating, and if there is an overage, we come back and express that and get a contract. Like for instance, when you approved the bidding for Mount Beacon, that was a little over.
Yeah.
So we came back, let you know it was going to be over, and this is how we were going to fund it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, if I could add a little bit, the way that you should think about certain departments is sort of the long view. The long view on water and sewer is that we've been investing, a couple $1 million a year consistently, year after year, to build the capacity, to do our updates. So with sewer, and George was around for this, we had stormwater separation requirements from sanitary sewer, and we had some upgrades we needed, and then you kind of keep building from there. Water, we've got dam issues that are more recent, and we kind of build into that. So this is more kind of like a couple million a year, kind of consistently. Ed, would you say we're going to finish up, or is that going to continue for a long time in terms of those kind of couple $1 million projects a year? Ed?
I'm getting on. Sorry, I sat back down. The major ones right now, we've been really focusing on, at least I have, with the reservoirs, and again, some of that's being driven by regulatory compliance. So as I try to predict, as once we start leveling, hopefully we get through these phases. Mount Beacon, Melzinga, continue to work on Mount Beacon tank. Fairview was just reconstructed. Howland's fairly new. It was built in the 90s. I'm looking at this, how our system is. I believe the next phase would be like start looking at some of the older water main replacements, try to avoid like any streets that we're redoing or them repaved. Try to focus on ones that maybe in conjunction it does become like a full reconstruction where we do the water main and the surfacing together. But I think that's more once we get through these like standalone items. That's kind of that would be the next phase of what we're looking at. Because we again all of our reservoirs were built right around Mount Beacon was built in the 1800s, but Cargill and Melzinga they were built like 1920s, 1930s, and some of those water mains are still active in the city. So they're reaching 100-year lifespan. They're made out of cast iron, which it can go for hundreds of years, but as it ages and ground shifts and stuff like that, it becomes more and more brittle, and it has more frequent breaks to it. So and it also kind of what we call tuberculating, just as I'm talking with my hands, so I apologize. It starts getting like almost like cauliflowered on the inside, which is it reduces the amount of water that passes through it, and it creates like friction loss. You don't get as good volume that passes through it as well. So that's kind of the area that I think as we kind of transition through once we get through the reservoirs. And just so that I know for people that are new to Beacon, the reservoir cycle is anywhere between 20 and 30 years of upkeep. So you get through this cycle, and the council and the next superintendent in 20 years, they'll be 20 to 30 years, they'll be bringing it to the council again for like remediation, rehab, superficial work, or another regulatory compliance that you have to meet. So hopefully that answered that.
No, it did. And, I just said that, having watched this for a long time, that, this is a $2 or $3 million a year cadence. It just keeps going. And, you think about water and sewer, it's huge infrastructure. It's probably, I don't know, making up a number, $100 million of infrastructure in terms of all the plants and all the pipes. So that's just kind of ongoing. And I would contrast that with roads. Roads are probably even bigger in terms of the cost of our infrastructure, but we can only work on like a couple million or 3 million a year, which means we have to pick and choose. And so we usually have a priority list that we work off of in terms of what are we working on next. And then sometimes you get the grants like the state roads, you can get money for that. So that kind of bounces around. And you saw fire, you didn't see the couple $100,000 a year because Chris took it off, Sue took it off the page. But what you see occasionally is a fire truck, right? Like every 5 or 10 years, you got $1 million for that. And then every so often, you got to do a building, right? That's really rare. So I'm just kind of pointing out examples of what the kind of cadence looks like for the different departments. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what I just wanted to add.
That's helpful.
Ed, when you're looking at the water mains, was that study ever done that found the leakage in the system? It was like maybe like an acoustic.
We do it every year.
You do it every year now. Okay.
Yeah, we did it earlier this year because we knew we were experiencing significant uptick in production in the middle of winter, which it was midsummer production in January. So we knew we had leaks. We actually found three significant leaks. Okay. And then one of them was it was on Tyranda, right near Van Eyck at the intersection where the water main broke, and it was actually leaking into the storm pipe underneath it. So it was never going to surface. Eventually, it would erode and we'd have a sinkhole, but we would never have found it unless we had the acoustics to locate it.
Because maybe that's a way to prioritize which mains to do, so we're saving money and ending our leakage.
I'm curious, in addition to the Hannah Lane point, sorry, I don't know if this is actually even a you question.
Getting my steps in, thank you.
If there are any other points along the Fishkill-Teller Street redesign where underground infrastructure might need to be updated, just thinking about if we're opening up the street or unpaving the street to repave the street, if we can be efficient about that.
We've done other work, and Central Hudson has done other work in it.
Yeah.
There's two water mains that are in Fishkill Avenue. There's a one on pretty much each side of the road. I believe the one's concrete main. don't know exactly the year it was installed, but in the scale of water mains, it's fairly new. There is still a pre-existing cast iron main that's there that supplies to some of the businesses and residents. If we were to add that scope to the project, we would probably drive just Fishkill Avenue to roughly about 10 million just for the length of it to complete it. So there's like, as the mayor touched on and some of the other stuff that Sue and Chris have touched on, there's just a scale of money that's available too. So the section of the sewer that we were working on, we looked at potential growth for the area. It's a known issue for staff that we maintain because it's very flat through that area. That's why we're extending it down Hannah Lane and pitching it towards Main Street to get greater flow. And we looked at it. We knew that there's a bottleneck there because it jogs down, it jumps to one side of the street, goes underneath a lamp pole, and it goes over here. It's it bounces around a little bit, so it'll be more of a straight shot and cleaned up. But realistically, like I said, to talk about replacing water mains, would love to, but there's just realistically about how much we can kind of spend in the scope for that project.
Yeah.
In the scope of that project, but there
Right.
might be other roads that come up, let's say in 2025, and as we're doing them in conjunction, we might add the water and sewer to that, ones that we have more opportunity to plan for as well. We're definitely looking at that.
Like when we
Cool.
redid Main Street, we tried to, we put out the word, like, if you're going to do work below the road, do it now,
Yeah.
because you're not getting a permit for a long time.
Yeah, I know it's a main fair that's had a lot of construction and updates done over the years, and what I'm hearing is that Hannah Lane is a particular pain point, and there aren't any other pain points sort of along that line on that scale right now.
Yeah, just like further up by the car dealerships, that's really like the flat area. It's very, very flat through there, and we clean it regularly with our sewer cleaning equipment. So yeah.
Cool, thank you.
And the other trade-off here is that Fishkill Avenue, Teller Avenue project actually commenced in 2010. And so as I explained this to George earlier, if we don't spend the money on the road reconstruction this year, we are at risk of losing the federal funds. So I'm trying to get it obligated by the end of this federal fiscal year, which is September 30th.
I just want to comment on Chris for that. Since he's been with the city, he's been driving that project. We have meetings, bi-monthly meetings, to make sure to keep going with the acquisitions where we are with the design. There's stuff that we've picked up from the design that we've asked to be corrected. There was like an intersection that for some reason just wasn't included in the project that's been now included. It was kind of skipped over. So, but he's been driving to get us to this end point.
One question, I think this has been answered in other contexts, but just it seems relevant to bring it up when we're talking about a 5-year capital plan. You made mention of growth when you were talking about, I think, the lift pumps, but it sounds like in terms of other growth or potential development expansion in Beacon that we have the capacity we need right now in water and sewer to manage that. So that is not a concern to actually add overall capacity. It's more maintaining and meeting new regulations.
That's correct. Our current water production is anywhere between like 2.1 million to 2.5 million daily average. The plant's designed for 4 million gallons of water a day, and we have at our disposal, our safe yield is 4.25. So we're safe there. Our sewer plant is designed for 6 million gallons of water a day, and I'm not sure with our daily average is, but it's about 3.5, I believe.
4, that's what he said. Yep.
Okay.
But looking out ahead, Ed has spec'd out a third well that we might try to acquire at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done some preliminary look at that, and we will continue to look at both conservation and additional water supply.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and
All
I
right.
just want to offer some advice on how to think through this, because I'm just trying to give you all the picture. The health of financial health of a city has a lot to do with keeping up with the long-term investments you have to do. And it can be very attractive to say, oh, we just won't do anything this year in this area, and we can put the money to something else. And that's always really risky. And the far better approach is just to keep going at that kind of consistent pace of, in this area, a couple million a year in roads, 2 or 3 roads you try to do a year, because if you fall off that, you suddenly get into fiscal stress. And then the other one, as Chris mentioned, is you miss a major project grant, right? So you lose your 95% funding on a major road, then you don't do it, and then you fall behind. And the cities nearby us have issues like that, and we don't, because we've been doing this very kind of gradual, consistent approach. And so I would just encourage that kind of steady as she goes approach for the projects.
All right.
Thanks.
So if there's no more question, maybe we can move back to the agenda here.
I have, sorry, one more question, and maybe this will come up in the funding plan, but if I recall, the ARP funding that the city was receiving was going towards water and sewer projects. Is that reflected in any of these projects, or was that a different project?
No, we put the $1.42 million in ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act funding, towards the primary settling tanks. That was approved in the 2021 capital plan. We've now executed contracts with TAM Enterprise to do that work, and we hope that they will complete one of the 3 tanks this year and the other 2 next year. So it's already underway, and then that grant would just go to pay, it pays 1.4 of about 1.9 million, and the rest would be bonded. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Mickey is going to, Michael Manzi is our superintendent of streets. We can't help but call him Mickey. Why don't you start with city lots, and then we'll roll into your equipment.
To start with, I want to start by apologizing to Ed. I pushed him out of the bench when he started talking about Spring Valley Street. Obviously, that was before me, long before me. Sounded like there's some sewer projects that were done that he was familiar with. I didn't mean to throw you under the bus, Ed. So to start with, obviously talking about the capital plan, and I know it's been mentioned a couple times tonight, Main Street was one of our big capital projects that we just finished. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everybody involved for helping out, my crew, the water department staff, Chris, Ben, getting the communication out there. A lot of the business owners, they were all patient and kind of went with the flow, so I'd like to thank everybody for that.
And credit to Mickey for just absolute marvelous coordination.
Thank you.
And he forgot to include, but the police also helped because we had to make sure the streets.
I apologize, yes.
All right, we get you
Sorry,
off.
Chief. Just one more thing, just to put it in perspective, like everybody's just talking about, you know, the infrastructure and the roads. Just to put it in perspective, when we did Phillip Street as a reconstruction back in 2018, that was a $4 million project. So that's where the numbers start to really hike up as far as getting into your infrastructure when we're doing roads, and something to think about.
And whereas Main Street was about 340,000 because we were just doing milling and paving, and then we did some ancillary work around the structures and the road. So like if you really dig down and you do all the infrastructure, you're going up by almost a factor of 10.
So I just wanted to put that in perspective. Maybe it'll help everybody out thinking about that. So on here to start with city building lots, I just kind of went through the city and reviewed a couple of lots that seem like they're in the most need for a mill and pave. Obviously, we got City Hall and we got Van Eyck. So I put those on the list. We pushed them out a little bit to 2024 and 2025. And again, just as placeholders and just kind of so it's earmarked and we know we're looking to do that.
And you'll see, like when we did Eliza Street over, we actually picked up additional parking spaces because our planner drew out a different scenario of laying it out. And we'll look to do that at Van Eyck as well.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask, is if we could prioritize the milling and paving of lots based on the yield of new parking. Because I remember I forget what we're calling the lots, but the ones behind the diner and the one behind Sun River Health, that when we have those 2 lots restriped, we can get a lot of new parking there, right?
Yes. What we'll do is we'll work with John Clark for the layout for that. He actually laid out Eliza Street, Churchill Street, or Church Street lot. We downsized the parking space a little bit, reconfigured some things to gain a couple extra spots. I think we got like 9 extra spots in that lot, if I'm not mistaken.
From which lot?
The Church Street
Oh,
lot,
from the
Eliza,
okay.
yeah. So-
And one of the reasons those aren't in the plan is because we also, the Main Street Access Committee has proposed redeveloping some of those lots. So again, we're really at an early stage of figuring out what we want to do with those.
Right, they have like planters and islands and stuff.
Well, or they could have buildings on them with parking below. That, if you look at the Main Street Access Committee report, that's what they're proposing for those 2 parking lots.
Yeah, and I know that that committee has also recommended stuff about at Fountain Square.
Yes.
And I brought this up about the striping there, which is little to no striping, and there's no,
It's on the list to be striped when they come back on June 6th.
right.
And so there's a couple crosswalks that
Crosswalks.
people have, Justice has one, you have one, they're all on the list.
Chris gave me a list, I guess, based on conversation, so June 6th, 7th, and 8th at night, we'll be doing, what we do is we do the short lines, which would be the crosswalks, stop bars, and then we have another contractor that we bid out, and he does the longer lines, which is the double yellows and the whites. So I'll be scheduling that up as well.
And as a smaller item, that is in our operating budget, so we put aside money every year to do some striping.
Could we,
And
could
we
get a
will
copy?
also be doing some of the side street parking kiosks, which was another element of the Main Street Access Committee's recommendation. A lot of the parking on those side streets is unregulated, so we don't tell people where to park, and then you get, 3 cars where you could have had 6. So we'll be, as funds are available and time is available, we'll be doing some of those side streets.
As an aside, I may have sent it to the wrong place. I sent a request for painting parking spots on Howland around Exeter Circle and the mountain. Should I have not sent that to the Traffic Safety Committee and maybe sent that to you, Chris?
Yes, forward that to me.
Okay, sorry.
Could
No,
we
that's
get a
okay.
copy of that list of potential striping, crosswalks, and parking, like the
Well,
areas that-
everything that's already striped will be restriped, and then we can try to put together all of the additional stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just keep in mind, as we continue and we start marking out streets with parking spaces, that obviously is going to increase my operating budget every year for painting as well. So, like, if we go and paint Howland Avenue, and we paint Elijah Street, paint all the states, again, that number is probably going to double. And we're looking possibly to go with the same type of paint that we used on Main Street, the epoxy, which is actually going to increase that even further.
Well, it'll increase the material cost. It could bring down the labor cost, because if you have to do it, if it's, 30% more, but you have to do it 60% less
Less
often,
frequently.
you're... Okay. Can we move on to the equipment?
Oh, I just had a quick question. When was the last time the City Hall lot was paved?
A long,
A
long
long-
time ago.
I'm guessing probably the same time the roof was done, Justice.
1996.
I think it was slightly after the settlement of Matawan.
I've been here since 2006, and to my knowledge, it hasn't been done in that time frame.
So he basically does crack fill and maintains it.
We
And-
crack filled it, we did crack fill and seal coated the whole parking lot 2 years ago, I believe, and restriped everything.
So just a little overdue.
Yeah, it's a little overdue, but it's also like when you have public streets and public lots that need it more or just as much, I'd rather have this lot look a little rough and those other areas look a little better.
Yeah.
We'll get to us, but, we're surviving here.
So moving on into the highway department, a lot of what I have here is equipment. Again, like everybody said earlier, we kind of go through, we assess. I have the mechanics that work right out of the highway department. We kind of look at what we put into each piece of equipment as far as repairs, physically what kind of condition they're in. In here I have dump, plow, and sander. It's in there 3 times. I have one 1993 truck and 2 1995s that are still in our mix. Those are kind of our backups, but they're not even really worthy of backups at this point. So we're looking obviously to build it into the capital so we can still provide the services for the residents. Again, if one of our frontline trucks go down, we have to rely on something like that. Our next oldest truck is a 2007. I think I have that built out in 2027, so at that point it'll be 20 years old. So again, that 20-year range, 15 to 20-year range is kind of what comes into play a lot of times. Obviously, what we do with the snow removal, the salt really does its toll, just like it does on personal vehicles. So with the corrosion from the salt, and obviously with working with the salt on the trucks, it really beats them up.
And again, like the mayor said, we're trying to get to that point of what do we spend a year, and it's roughly about $500,000-600,000, other than the special items. So there's 2 special items on here that we're proposing. One is a salt brine maker, and Mickey, you want to just talk about what we're envisioning to test on that?
Sure. Salt brine, basically what it is, it's a water and salt mix. There's a machine that kind of mixes it together. You set the ratio you want. What it would consist of is that machine, and at least one holding tank with secondary containment, and then probably like a 3,000-gallon tank truck with a spray boom on it. What happens is you can go out and pre-treat that prior to a storm. If you know 2-3 days prior to a storm, you can go out and treat the roads. You've probably seen that on 84, where you'll see like the lines before a snowstorm. That's the salt brine. So what happens is once it starts to snow, that gets activated, starts melting off, and it just kind of creates a brine on the road, so it helps them keep everything melted off. Typically, the way it's done now, we put out rock salt, and then we go through and plow, and the rock salt ends up in our storm basins, it ends up on the side of the road, and then we have to, treat again. So it's going to, I think in the long run, it's going to help with save on overtime, and it, again, benefit, because once the snow stops, your final scrape, it'll melt right off, and it'll create safer roads.
I was going to ask, is the salt brine better for the roads than the rock salt?
The roads itself aren't a problem with salt. The problem with the salt a lot of times is the storm structures, because a lot of times they have cement. Cement is it's more prone to damage by salt. So again, if we can decrease the salt usage, it's just better all around.
Like
obviously.
when we dump rock salt, it can spill over onto the cement sidewalks, like the ones that we're going to put on Fishkill Avenue. The brine is a much more precise application. You're using less salt and you're putting it where you need it only.
And it's just something, I previous to being employed here, I utilized it a little bit. I ran snow on IBM down in Yorktown, and we started to switch over to that, and the effects and the impact it had. The neighboring wells down there, they were having problems with, so that's why they looked to switch over. And the town of Yorktown came in, they kind of discussed stuff. We can even get the state, I'm sure will come down here and talk to the council and kind of educate them as well on it.
And other cities are doing this. Kingston pre-treats their roads.
I think the initial setup is a little bit more, but I think in the long run, it's going to be a savings for everyone. And like I say, it's going to create a safer atmosphere.
And then the second new item are the solar panels that we're proposing to put on the south-facing roof of the city highway garage. It's a perfect roof because it's metal and we can clip them on. We've spec'd it out where we think we can get a 170 kilowatt system. That's about the use of 20 normal houses, average houses. And that will help move the city closer to 100% locally generated renewable electricity. It actually will cover about 4.2% of our usage. And we did get a tentative grant award from Assemblyman Jonathan Jacobson for that we're now processing. So we hope that about $125,000 of that will be deferred by grant.
One other new item I have on here, just most of it, like Chris said, is replacement. That asphalt hot box that's listed on here, what that will enable us to do, it's a system, it's a trailer that gets towed behind the truck, and it'll hold up to 4 ton of blacktop, and that'll allow us to do a hot mix for patching in the wintertime. And again, you've probably seen it on the news, New York City, Long Island. I've seen it on 84 this past year. It just gives us what we typically do in the colder temperatures, in the colder months, we use cold patch. So it's just something like you buy off the shelf, but I buy it in bulk. It doesn't last as long, it doesn't stay as long. You get a little bit of wet weather and it peels right up, and you have the same pothole you're dealing with 2 days prior. So hopefully that'll help to improve that as well. So that's why I was looking to do something like that. Like Susan said, as technology changes, we look to try to upgrade our equipment to match the times.
I have a question about the 3-ton roller. Is that the money there for 2023? Is that for repairs, or is that the cost of the actual machine? And are we purchasing it, or is that the cost to rent or lease it?
The 3-ton roller you said, Justice?
Yes.
That's purchasing a new one. What that is we have a small, behind our blacktop truck, or I'm sorry, we use a small truck with a trailer and then the blacktop truck. So when the guys go out to patch, they'll take the truck with the trailer with the small roller on it. So that's a small roller that fits on our little trailer. Again, it's old, it's kind of dilapidated a little bit, it's tired, so we'd like to get that replaced. But that is a new machine, it's not repairs or anything like that, it's a new machine.
And anything that's a rental or a lease would generally be in the operational budget because it's a recurring expense each year?
Yeah, and if I could just offer a bit on this, and Susan, you'll probably remember this. Several years ago, all the equipment in the highway department was really old. We hadn't replaced anything. And we were looking at, this big chunk, and we said, look, you've got to figure out how to space it out and kind of replace, so much a year, which is what you're seeing in this budget. You're seeing, 400,000-ish, and you're kind of picking the oldest piece of equipment and saying, what, is it time to update? And that's a much more kind of average, reasonable cadence, and it looks good. Obviously, you do once in a blue moon, we have to do a highway garage. But this kind of equipment should get spaced out like this, and it's a good flow. I like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Is there any other questions for Mickey or the equipment list that we have here?
And your highway garage is almost new, so you're in a good place for another generation on that building.
That was finished in 2017, right? December 16, January 17. So, and again, I don't think anybody's come up to take a tour yet, so.
That was going to be my item. I'm trying to wrap my head around all of the vehicles that are part of this and right-sizing that with all of the capital budget places, but I think that would be solved by just going to take a tour. So I would love to do that.
And we'll have been set up some times for you to go see the highway.
I think that was our next one anyway.
Okay, good. Okay. Thanks, Mickey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Mark Price, our Director of Recreation. Unless, Ed, you want to jump up again and...
Hi, everyone. I guess we can stop talking about hidden pipes and big machines and stuff.
No more pipes.
Talk about all the fun stuff. So my capital project list over the years has essentially been updates and improvements to the parks for the most part. The Green Street restoration, court rehabs at South Avenue and Memorial Park, South Avenue Playground, pavilions at Riverfront and South Avenue, Memorial Park, restoration of the portion of the tennis courts for the skate park that was built by volunteers, and most recently the path along Wilk Street were sort of some of the bigger projects over the years. We've had some smaller ones with swing sets and stuff like that. So looking at what we have coming up, the sort of 2023 stuff, we have a couple little projects we're working to complete this year. The South Avenue Park bathroom engineering was one of the major parks that doesn't have a restroom facility. So we're looking for a small bit of money to sort of do a concept or a design. And one of the projects I'm trying to get done this year is replacement of the retention walls, or the retaining walls over there, which are working, but past their useful life. So between those two projects, it'll really dress up that end. We're putting new sidewalks on South Avenue this year, which isn't my project, but I'm excited to see that change. And then, as mentioned earlier, most of this is sort of concept, budgeting, planning. But the items in here are essentially improvements to the park system. Hilltop Pavilion at Memorial is another pavilion. There's always a call for more pavilions in the parks. The Riverfront Park Court and Park Reconstruction Project is a significant one. We have construction documents that over the last several years went through concepting and public input, and we're pretty much shovel ready with that project. So, it's a nice design. It's essentially a replacement of the front of the park where the basketball courts are, and parking area and sort of entrance experience. It leaves most of the green space in the park alone. The USC pool restoration is always on our capital plan because at some point, someday, soon, there'll definitely need to be a restoration to the pool, but we basically dust her off every year, and if it doesn't need it, we don't do it. But we like to keep that on just in case. I think it's like a good luck totem. The Memorial Park walkway is a project that would essentially create a loop, including that Wilk Street path on the flat of that park. Basically the ADA accessible. It'll be a 3/4 mile loop that snakes through the lower end of the park, which I think is a fantastic project. Splash pads and playgrounds at Riverfront Memorial. Both of those major playgrounds are unsupported, which means I can't buy parts for the play structures anymore. So they would need a kind of a full replacement. Splash pads are something we've discussed over the years. Similar, if anyone's been up to Bowden Park, they have a small splash area, but it would basically be a wet feature in 2 of our parks, which I think, if combined with the playground restoration, we could probably do some pretty neat play areas in those 2 major parks. And then at the end, again, a place marker for the recreation center. And this all sort of, again, conceptual. I think our plan to walk through this study this year and this report would maybe inform us as to some other paths we may take. But these are sort of a starting point for things that have been identified over the years that could be added to the parks or improved in the parks. And I'll just make one note of something else in discussion with the other departments and their equipment and bandwidth. Anything we do in parks, I feel like the neighbor that doesn't have any tools in his shed and has to borrow everything from the neighbors, which is what anything I do requires the help of the water department or the highway department. And we just did a bunch of work down at the riverfront, which Mickey mobilized his guys, his equipment. We cleaned up along the ferry dock and made some improvements to the dock area and parking area down there. So, anything they're doing to do the boring stuff, they're helping with the fun stuff too. So.
I recall prior council in discussion about the Memorial Park Pavilion asked a question about Wi-Fi, if it's a possibility there, but I can't remember what the answer was.
We had around the sort of spill off of the pandemic, there was some discussion about free public Wi-Fi at Memorial and the recreation center. I believe a private resident helped Beacon Mutual Aid create a free Wi-Fi network over there, but we have power at the bathroom, which it could be feasible. Anywhere, from my understanding, that there's power and at least there's the potential for that. So, same thing over at the rec center. I just don't think they turned it around at that point. But.
And then on the grant aspect, the 2 here that were recently funded for, or at least tentatively funded, are the Veterans Place Pocket Park, which would close Veterans Place to vehicle traffic and make a pedestrian plaza there. And then also Bridge Street off of Liberty Street, there is some money that's pending from the state to do some like a phase 1 rehabilitation of that. We're still applying for those funds. You have to go through a process. So I wouldn't necessarily have put them in 2023, but for that funding. And if I don't get the funding, I would probably put things like Riverfront Park in front of that.
Yeah.
Do we, it's okay if we don't have the answer yet because we're still applying for it, but do we have any sense of how far those amounts of money get us in those projects?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine.
And I told the grant source that we had some planning work to do to figure that out.
Right. Okay.
The one thing, Chris, you said about about Riverfront Park. We might also want to see if something's going to move forward with Metro North and transit oriented, because a project there, we might be able to get a good piece of Riverfront Park improvements funded there.
So we've heard rumor that Metro North is looking at some kind of redevelopment of the parking lot across from our park that would actually span to our park. And it could help us bring sewer service to our park as well. So again, that would change. One of the reasons we're slow walking that project is we just want to see what happens across the way and how that might influence that, and maybe if that, whatever that development team could put some money into the park.
We're saying like a walkway to Seeger Park?
Yeah, over the tracks.
That would be great. Yeah, it's a kind of a weirdly accessible park.
Yes.
As it is, yeah.
So.
We have a concept for Green Street Park that was put together by One Nature. We had some community meetings a few years ago that you led, Mark. There's a few more steps of that project to go, and I was wondering if there was a reason that they're not in this plan. Or are you thinking that they would come out of the regular budget, or are they grants, or what's your thinking about Green Street? Because there's a little more to go yet. There was supposed to be like a little Tots Park, I think.
Yep,
and
that equipment has still been backordered.
Well, that,
so,
yeah.
We did
But I think there
all.
was supposed to be like a fenced-in play area for small children. There was, I think we want to redo the basketball courts, have a meeting space.
Yeah, there's a few tick items on there. I think in my head, we sort of shelved it for a short period of time because we had stuck, I think 2 cycles of capital projects into the park. So I don't necessarily think we were.
So the landscaping and the equipment were capital?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the new play structure, the path, that sort of excavation and replacement of the retaining walls were all 2 cycles of capital projects. So plan exists. I think we just, had invested quite a bit of time and over there, so we switched gears to a couple other parks. But
And I know we've been trying to invest a little more like in settlement camp because there were some buildings and areas in kind of rough shape.
Yeah, it needs it too.
And where we're trying to evolve, the recreation department is increasingly becoming the recreation and community assistance department or community services department. This study that Mark is now conducting with Weston and Sampson is going to help inform the direction. But we want to get to a point where we view the parks and that other community infrastructure as something that we're funding on a sustainable level every year. So we're not just doing one-offs, but we're making sure there's a consistent investment over time to bring the park system up to what residents expect and deserve.
Maybe along those lines, I'm very excited about the South Avenue bathroom engineering study, and I'm curious, I guess if we're looking at a 5-year timeline, I'd be interested in seeing more public restrooms as well. I am not sure where the best spot is. There are studies. I know that the Main Street Access Committee had some thoughts, but it is a public resource that I would like to see more of if we're thinking about it.
One of the challenges for us has been the vandalism in them. So as we do this, we're going to have to figure out something that's like unbreakable or less breakable. The other thing that we are working on, and I hope to do outside of the capital program, is open up the bathrooms at Poe Hill Park. There's the the visitor center, but it's often closed. And so we've talked to them about putting in an exterior door that accesses the bathroom, closing it off, and then we would clean it using the same service that we use for Green Street and Memorial Park. So those are the ones, right? South Avenue is definitely there. But when we've had so much damage, sometimes you think like maybe there's a better porta potty or something. But we will explore it.
To follow up on the South Ave bathrooms, that the reason why there isn't the construction cost is because you don't know until you've done the engineering study exactly what you need to put in the capital budget. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I mean, we have to identify infrastructure, sewer, water mains, electrical. So I think the first pass is kind of coming up with a concept. Is it a small building? Is it a big building? Does the parking lot need to be improved or changed?
Right.
Siting it, all those things I think factor into the first pass on that. Once you have a concept or a design, then it's you can start figuring out what it can be. I mean, you can buy a precast building, have it delivered, and stick it over the sewer main and be done, or you can be a little more thoughtful about the landscape and where it's going to be sited and stuff like that, so.
Great.
So a future budget would include whatever outtake of the engineering study that we do.
Do you have, Mark, actually, do you have sort of a sense, or maybe it's part of a study or not, how much our parks are used these days? I'm kind of wondering, like, I don't know how, for example, to go back to South Avenue Park, how much it's used by people versus Memorial versus Green Street versus the Riverfront Park, and I didn't know if that helped make your decision in terms of which ones are worked on when and which kind of equipment would be beneficial to the people who are actually making use of it, or might make more use of it. If they could.
Besides garbage cans on Monday mornings and sort of drive-by observations, I'd tell you, they're all pretty busy. Which is the busiest would be a hard one to say, but I think all of our parks get extensive use, throughout the day. There isn't a time I drive by the park and there isn't somebody doing something, in them, so.
It just strikes me, though, that Memorial Park also gets the school traffic and the day-to-day traffic, so it's beyond recreation. That
Gym classes, scholastic sports, all of the, from pretty much sunrise to sunset, there's something going on in that park.
Yeah.
I mean, the great days, you go in, drive by around 5 in the afternoon, and every sports field is lit up, and there's people walking dogs and playing frisbee. It's really quite something, when the parks look like that.
Yeah, I like that idea of the walkway around for that reason.
One last thing, Mark. We had, when we were walking by the creek, we had identified this area that was owned by the city. Looks like it's kind of informally being used as a park, and could theoretically connect up to Phillips Street if we did everything correctly. We never really talked about, like, what are the incremental steps to move that from an informal park to a formal park. I'm actually looking at you, Chris, because I think maybe I was supposed to follow up with you, but maybe we could have a call about that and just talk about, like, what are the steps to kind of, like, make it nicer. Perhaps an engineering study is something for, like, 2024 or 2025, but I think you mentioned that, like, there's little things we can do initially, and then we can, like, slowly build up over time.
Yeah,
but maybe we can just talk about it.
I'll need to be reminded about that. I'm sorry, I'm not recalling
So
the
on
project.
the eastern spur of the Greenway Trail, it goes through this area that's widely used as, I don't know, we saw it definitely being used. We saw lawn furniture out and picnic tables and stuff. It's a gorgeous area. It's owned by the city. It's right along the river. Needs some cleanup. But it also connects to Phillips Street by an easement. And the reason this is a big thing for me is I really like the idea of having a park as a destination along the Greenway Trail, but also because the people of Mount Beacon Park don't have close access to any kind of playground or park. And so if we could connect it to Phillips Street, that would give that entire neighborhood, they could walk down to the creek without having to get into a car or anything, so.
Okay. Can you set up a call on that, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And there are some smaller things, like forgive me I forget who asked about there's a connector between two streets, and
That was me.
yes. And so that is on our list of trying to improve so that people really can use it. And then there's, like, little cut throughs, like at the end of Delavan to Memorial Park. So some of the smaller stuff we can just do with our own forces, and we'll figure out where that sweet spot is for you. And I just want to thank Mark and his team, like, to think of all the stuff that gets done, and they have 3 full-time employees is just amazing. And he has this battery of seasonal help, lifeguards, part-time after-school help, and then contractors who come in to do classes. And I'm really proud of our park system and recreation department. And we're coming back in a couple weeks to do our first presentation for the recreation study to get some of your initial feedback.
Great.
Yep, and just for perspective, this was an area both in the capital plan and in the operating budget that was significantly smaller 10 years ago, right? And that's been kind of slowly but surely beefed up, both in terms of the annual operating budget, but also, as you can see, in the capital plan. you know, we have to be careful about it. We have to kind of go kind of gradually, but you can see these projects getting laid out, and that's a good thing. So that's a significant change from, you know, 10, 20 years ago when there was very little being done capital-wise.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, next we have Chief Sands Frost talk about the police department capital budget. Now, the police are in this building, so their only building item is in here, and the rest is mostly vehicle replacement, so.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Everybody's looking good since yesterday. The capital plan for the police department really centers around three things: vehicles, cameras, and our locker room. With the vehicles, what we're doing is trying to maintain the fleet that we have. We're not increasing the size of the fleet, and any vehicle that we do get, we would then auction off the vehicle that's being replaced. We're looking to pursue electric vehicles and hybrids. We know we can replace unmarked vehicles with electric vehicles now. We did that this year with the Detective Bureau, and that vehicle so far has been a success, and we want to continue that with the unmarks. Ford makes a hybrid vehicle right now for patrol vehicles, and we have a couple of them now on the street. And as soon as somebody makes an electric police vehicle, we will definitely be pursuing that. But right now, we do know there's hybrids. I just can't. It's hard for me to foresee what somebody's going to come out with next year or the following year. But we're definitely going to keep our eyes out on that. The only vehicle in the capital plan that's not electric or hybrid right now, we have a crime scene vehicle. It's a 2005 Chevy Suburban that used to be a patrol vehicle. It was actually the sergeant's vehicle when we first got it. Spent a lot of time in patrol, and now we use it as a crime scene vehicle. Basically, the crime scene vehicle carries anything that's not normally maintained on our unmarked cars. Most crime scenes, you just need, you need a camera equipment, you need to measure things, be able to collect some evidence, do fingerprints, a lot of basics. But some scenes we go to require a lot more. That crime scene vehicle has a tent in there, so if we're getting bad weather, we can protect something at the scene that needs to be protected. We have a metal detector in there. We have tools for digging in case we have to recover anything that's underground. We have tools for cutting or prying if need be. We have sifters so we can sift dirt in there. We have a small generator with lights in case darkness is starting to be a problem. So that carries things that we do need. We don't need it on every scene, but it is needed on from time to time. So the vehicle we want to get for that is actually going to be a Ford truck. It's a utility truck with a slide in the middle, a sliding enclosure in the middle, so it can fit everything that's in the Suburban, and capable of towing also our trailers. Right now we only have one vehicle that can tow our trailers, and this would be a backup to that. We have one 2012 Ford pickup that was a hand-me-down from Mickey Manzi's Highway Department. It doesn't get beat up as much as they beat it up. It's not plowing or carrying construction equipment or anything in the back. But we move barricades with it. We pick up, if there's large pieces of evidence we need to pick up with that. We use it to tow our trailers when need be. We have a reason for it. It's a 2012, and to replace that would just be whenever Mickey's going to get rid of a vehicle that we know is capable of doing our support work and maybe can't keep up with the amount of work the highway department does. So the crime scene vehicle is also going to be a backup vehicle for that, for towing in case that truck's in the shop or anything. As far as cameras, we're just trying to fill some of the voids on Main Street. We have areas that we can't see. Those cameras have helped us out a lot, and whether it's solving a crime, or we also use it, an example, if there is a fight call at main and teller, or officer on the desk or dispatcher on the desk can focus in on that while they're dispatching the vehicles, and then that person can either they can tell us what's happening, because not every call that comes in is what we're going to. But it tells us if there's actually a fight going on, how many people are involved, any weapons involved or not. Or sometimes we get a fight call and there's nothing happening on the corner. So he'll tell units to slow down. We'll still respond to see what's going on. But that's actually a big help too. So people aren't driving too quickly to get to something that's not occurring. And so the cameras are a big help. They're really a big help when we're trying to solve something that happened. and we're trying to locate vehicles or people that were walking in the area at the time, trying to track a suspect. And then with the locker room downstairs, it's got some issues. We had the engineers look at it. Part of the floor is lifting up. Don't know why. That's something that they would have to dig into to find out. And of course, now that's causing all the tiles and stuff to also move. We have 2 showers. We're only using one of them right now because one of the showers, the water was leaking through the wall. And the other side of the wall, there's a hallway that goes back to HR and the classroom. So we stopped using that because there was starting to be some wall damage on that. And the engineer said we should be moving some things around because our showers and toilets and urinals and sinks, there's nothing keeping those apart from the rest of the locker room. So you get the humidity problems that comes with all the water down there. And the engineers are saying that it really should be, everything should be moved a little bit. So when we walk in, there's 2 separate compartments in there. One that actually contains the shower, toilet, sinks and urinal, and then with a full wall and a door that leads into the rest of the locker room to keep that moisture out from the locker room. That's people, all the officers' personal clothing, their police clothing's in there, and we want to keep that humidity out. And it's in the basement, so we've had some water down there. We've had toilets back up that the water ends up down there and things like that. So being in the basement, that's where the water ends up when there's a problem in the building. If anybody has any questions about anything.
And that's the original bathroom. So like we just replaced the roof after 25 years. It's time to replace the locker room after 25 years. I would have moved it up further, but we have a locker room that's actually even worse, which is you're going to hear about it in a few minutes.
Right.
It does sound like that one's
We have
worse than
female
ours.
officers on duty as well. Is it broken down into?
The female locker room is doing okay right now.
Okay, so there already is a
Because
separation.
we have 2 female officers, and we've not had many more than that, I don't think, at one time. And
Yeah.
and the other one gets very heavy use.
Mhm.
And I don't know how water flows, but it doesn't flow into their locker room.
Ed?
They've been spared that damage. And the floor is not lifting up there either, so we don't know what's causing the floor to lift up in the men's locker room, but obviously it has to get looked at.
Let us know.
And again, big picture, we're trying to do about 2 vehicles a year. We're slowly, this department has actually adopted hybrid and EVs more than any other department, which is great because their cars get the most use. And they also run a lot, so these hybrids really do save us on emissions and gas cost overall, even though they are more expensive to purchase than the regular cars.
Which
There's an
cars are
electric
the?
We
Sorry.
were averaging 3 vehicles a year we were getting, but we're trying to catch up because our fleet got old. We were having a lot of maintenance issues, and we were having a lot of problems. And we've caught up with that, so now we can slow down to 2 vehicles a year to just try to maintain what we have.
Chief, why are there, oh, sorry, just.
I'm sure we have similar questions. I just want to jump at where we're at with the, just a point of clarification. Is it just the crime scene truck that is not available as electric and only available as hybrid? Because you said the police department has the most electric vehicles.
Yes.
Okay, so the police department is purchasing other electric police cars?
Yes. Like
Okay.
I know right now every unmarked car we can get in the future looks like it's going to be electric.
Great.
And as
Yeah,
soon
and
as
the
they come
patrol
out
car.
with an electric actual police patrol vehicle, we can switch. Right now they do make a hybrid. Ford is the only one that makes that. So we've already purchased 2 of them, and they're doing well, and we're going to continue that until an electric vehicle comes into place.
And you'll see an announcement. We're going to do a little announcement of the 3 cars that have recently been added to the fleet. The reason we didn't do an electric here is Ford doesn't make an electric F-250. They make an electric F-150, but that doesn't carry the weight. So again, as we watch the technology get better and their capacity for these batteries, we will try to move to electric. The other thing with the crime scene truck is it stays on and the lights are on, so it really does drain the battery.
Yeah.
It's the same like with snow plows, like the amount of power that the plows use just would eat up the current battery capacity very quickly.
So this is probably Dan's question, but I saw on the budget that there are 4 unmarked vehicles. Are those separate vehicles? And I know they're for 2025, 2026. But I saw one of them was only for 17,000. Was that just repairs, or what's the situation? Why are those
Let me see
different
what you're looking
prices?
I think that 17,000 is the camera, actually, if
Yeah,
you,
it's just-
it's
Oh,
just
okay.
hard to run across. So the
That's
street
funny.
camera for 285 is 17,000.
Great.
Right.
Okay. So back to my previous question. Thank you for the clarification. Are there 4 unmarked? Is that the amount of unmarked vehicles we have in the city?
No. We have 9 unmarked vehicles. Myself and each lieutenant has one. And administratively, sometimes we all have to be different places at, each time. And then each detective has a vehicle assigned to them also. And that's needed if for instance, you get a crime scene, and maybe people fled and we have the vehicle someplace else. And you got to have a crime scene where the crime occurred, you have a vehicle that's also a crime scene. If someone's in the hospital, technically that person in the hospital is a crime scene. If you have an injury, we have to photograph the injuries. We have to, if there's blood on the clothing, we have to take that, because not only can it be the victim's blood, it can be a suspect's blood. Somebody's got to start going around looking at camera footage, trying to figure it out. So the detectives they can end up in 4 or 5 different places. So they each have a vehicle also on that.
And this is a relatively new change for the police department. There was some concern about going to electric vehicles and what the performance would be like. The prior city administrator had a plug-in hybrid that I decided to get rid of because I don't use it. And I ended up transferring that over to Detective Lawrence, who was really into it. He had driven one on vacation. He was willing to plug it in. And once Detective Lawrence did that, then the next car that we got was fully an EV, a Mach-E, and that's now with our detective sergeant. So we've kind of broken through that kind of concern about performance, and that's where I hope we get at some point with the patrol cars. When they go EV, there's always going to be a concern like, well, will that last on a scene, and will that perform, and does that have the power? We've broken that now with unmarked cars, so at some point all our unmarked cars will be electric, and then we have to think about some additional plugs to power them.
Well, if acceleration is an area of interest, EVs beat combustion engines on acceleration.
You should see Mark Price in his plug-in. Yeah. So we have no doubt after seeing Mark drive his plug-in.
The questions that Justice, are you the questions I had was about the F-150, but I wanted to ask about the total vehicle to staff ratio and how that compares with other departments, because it seems like we have cars for people who are not at work.
For not at what?
More cars than people, or
No, but we have 12 marked cars, 12 marked patrol vehicles. Right now we have 21 people that share them. We do have 6 more openings in this department that would be added to that group. Once we get those numbers up, we're not going to increase the number of cars. So there's more than one person in patrol assigned a vehicle, because everybody works different shifts. So if you have a vehicle assigned to you and you're working days today, and if Justice working evenings, you might be sharing the same car. When you come in at the end of the tour, he's relieving you and going out. So we do share the marked vehicles, and we're able to do that. And then we do have a pickup truck, which is a support vehicle. And again, we use it for barricades, towing the trailer. If we have a lot of evidence, we had the state police call us up one time to help them get a body out of the mountain, because I don't know why the state didn't have a pickup truck, but we went up there with the pickup truck to help them out. And then we have the unmarked cars assigned to the administration and detectives. We have a UTV. We use that a lot at the events. You'll see that now. Hopefully, COVID stays away from us, and we get more of the events. Pre-COVID, you would see that down at the river festivals. It's a little bit easier to get through the crowd. People like it. We had it over at the Elks Club for Community Day. Kids like climbing around on it. But the
We
UTV,
used it for sign deployment when we paved Main Street, because we just plopped all the signs in the back.
And
It's a little a UTV, a utility vehicle. So it's like a
Like a
fancy golf
side-by-side,
cart.
it's a,
Okay.
yeah, and we've used it too, like down Dennings Point. We've actually helped the fire department and the ambulance corps getting to.
It's like an off-road vehicle.
Helping them get people and supplies down to victims and helping get the victims out.
Clearly, we have to
down
give the
there like
council a
that.
ride in the UTV.
Sounds really fun.
We could do that. We could do that. We could have everybody stop by and take turns taking a ride in that.
I guess the,
And then you got to remember too, is all the vehicles aren't always up and running, right? Either between car accidents or maintenance
Right.
or breakdowns. You know, we have to-
Trainings where people are going.
I guess I
Yeah.
was just, yeah, I mean, that's helping answer the question that is coming to mind, which is why would we have more vehicles than officers on duty? Like,
Well, because also
Right, like
too,
if you
you
have
have to
seven.
be prepared to call other people in. And when you have events like the fireworks, Spirit of Beacon Day, the Parade of Green, you know, we have events that we have more than just a shift working.
Mhm.
And when they come in, they have vehicles. There are some shifts or some events where every marked vehicle we have is on the roadway.
Okay.
And the detectives rotate being on call, so they have a car that they take home with them because they have to go right out from their house to respond. So like when we had the accident on Route 52, they just respond from their house for that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Oh, wait. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, the street camera on 223 Main, is that just to fill a blind spot that you guys don't have?
Yeah, that's on the county building there, right? And, yeah, there was a camera up there working. I don't know how long ago. It's been quite a while since that's been operating, and that's actually to get that camera back up and running. It's on the county building there.
The county shouldn't pay for that?
I'll
write 'em a
probably
letter.
not. 'Cause
It's ours.
I don't
Yeah,
think
I
the
mean, we
county-
have a good relationship with the county.
the county's really not
We use
using it.
their
We're
lot.
using it, and they allow us to put it on the building.
Okay.
And we're using their electric when it's working.
And all of the other cameras on the schedule are cameras that exist right now, correct? And it's just maintenance on them?
I'm sorry, what was that?
All of the other cameras that are on the plan, those already exist right now, correct?
That are on this plan?
Yeah, like
No,
Main Street and
no,
Tyranda, 285.
Yeah, no.
Some of them are to fill
the one,
gaps.
The one at 223 Main, it was an existing camera. Main and 9D would be a new camera. Main and Tyranda would be a new camera. 285 Main Street would be a new camera. And Mays Hook and Ladder there is a camera there that used to be a functional camera, and that's not functioning anymore either.
Got it.
So this would increase surveillance.
It would increase the amount of cameras on Main Street, yes.
And it's helpful because we've actually done investigations where you have, data on one area of Main Street and then this, a missing link, and then on the other side. So it really is filling in, and they are used for the investigations that we're doing.
But there's I've confirmed it a few times, but I'll try a fourth time.
facial recognition.
No facial
Yeah,
recognition.
no facial recognition.
Okay.
Except,
Yeah.
hey, that's,
right, yeah.
that's Dan Heimer Blair out there painting his.
No privacy is violated.
Right. Actually, it's, if something's in progress, we'd have to zoom in. Like if I didn't know you, Dan, and zoomed in, I might get a description of you now, but I wouldn't have any idea who you were. Being that I know you, I could be able to see enough to go, hey, that's Dan Blair. But same
and
thing
with
with
cell phones, so
same thing
ubiquitous.
under
like-
normal use, we're not getting plate numbers going by.
Right.
You would have to know something's going on and then zoom in on the car to try to get a plate number. But if we're trying to follow up later on, we can see a vehicle description go by, but it's very, very tough for us to get a plate number on the cameras that we have.
Any other questions? All right. Batting cleanup is David
Thank you,
Tavernier.
everybody.
David is our chief operator at the wastewater treatment plant, and I think I don't think David was there the day we did the tour, but he works with Greg and oversees Greg, so he's going to give an overview of some of the things that we're doing right now on the sewer plant, like a project that just started, and then what we're proposing over the next few years.
Good evening. We are in the middle of rehabbing the primary treatment tanks at our wastewater treatment facility, so that's ongoing. It's exciting that we're going to get that done. So that's one of the big capital projects that is already taken course.
And
so
that,
now-
again, is the ARPA money.
Yeah. So now moving on to the CapEx. A restroom or a bathroom was mentioned in the police department, and I think, Chris, you mentioned something about another one that was going to show its ugly face, right? So this is our bathroom and locker room situation. So let me explain. At any given time, we have 7 to 9 guys working, but we have one functional restroom. We do have 2 showers. One of them is not used because it actually drains into the floor of the locker room, and the other one is leaking onto an active stairwell. So you can imagine 7 to 9 guys working at a wastewater plant, end of their shift, with one shower that is barely operational. That's kind of tough. And so that's the reason why we want to be able to dignify, as it were, the workforce, having a centralized locker room with a working shower. So it kind of touches on health and safety, but again, it adds to the employee dignity. So that's the reason for that locker room renovation. And I know the guys would appreciate it greatly to have that flexibility. Any questions on this particular?
And again, while this building is 25 years old, that's over 50 years old down there. So this is something that is one of those easy things to neglect over the years, kind of like our parking lot out here, except that this really is where people spend the majority of their days. And in trying to attract and retain good employees, they really need to have a safe and dignified work environment.
Yeah, and it's two shifts and 365 days a year, so it becomes almost like home to many. Very good. So moving on to...
Oh, I do have just a quick question. Is this, is the money proposed for this including like an engineering study for this, or is there a plan already in place or set for?
We have architectural drawings that were done. We just come back and probably reconfirm dimensions and the program of space and then move forward. But this number came out of an actual engineer estimate.
Great.
Thanks.
And the locker room does have a gender-neutral design, or?
So the locker room would be I think we're gender neutral on the scheme that we did. We don't even have, all you have is a men's room down there. So there's no, if we have somebody, like we recently had an EPA audit. So if somebody comes in and needs a different bathroom, we don't even have that to offer. Yeah, I think that's where we headed.
I think there's various configurations on the Anderson Consulting drawings that we got.
But we're trying to make it so that the shower stalls and stuff are
private.
Yeah, we'll make sure that's incorporated.
Great.
Thank you. Moving on to point 2 is the dewatering system upgrade, both the building and the actual belt press. And so dewatering is an intrinsic part of the wastewater process, and it's the way we separate the solids from the water. And the Beacon's belt press is at the end of its service life. As a matter of fact, I was reading a 2014 engineering study, and at 2014 they said it's at the end of its useful lifespan. So over the past year, we spent about $50,000 basically replacing parts that fail or are simply literally falling apart because it's a very corrosive environment. So this makes these belt press runs highly inefficient. I want to remind you that we do take haulers, so they bring their waste and we have to process it. That's one of the ways that we process it. Aside from our own, the sludge that is produced, the biosolids from the city of Beacon. So it's basically one of the primary components. So if that shuts down, it really brings the whole operation to a halt. And so the dewatering building that houses the belt press also needs to be refurbished. For example, the roof, masonry, ventilation upgrade, electrical needs to be brought up to code, we need to create a clean room for the operator, because currently it's not the best environment for the operator. There's a lot of mist, corrosive environment. So we need a kind of like a clean room where that operator can go in there and be in a safer environment. So that is the second component of the CapEx for wastewater treatment tonight. Any questions on this particular?
When are you hoping we would break ground on that building?
Well,
Or the update to that building?
yeah, I believe 2024 is
Yeah.
when we're hoping for that to happen.
Because we'll be done with the primary settling tanks in 2023. We do have some design considerations. We're assessing like a new belt press versus a centrifuge, and there are other wastewater treatment departments like Poughkeepsie that use a centrifuge, and that gets more of the water out. It does use more electricity, but you're sending out a lot less waste. We pay about $110 a ton for the waste that we send out, and we'd have less trucks going out of the plant as well if we could get our sludge cake to have less water composition.
And
So
water's
we're
heavy.
going to, yeah, water is heavy, and we're paying to ship water. So we are going to assess the trade-offs of those two technologies, and I know David was going to go up and see the centrifuge, and his staff is assessing how that might work in our facility.
Throw in a few cans of Lysol, too. Febreze.
That always helps, right? Any other questions?
Well, we noticed there was no smell on the day that we visited, despite the heat, because it's such a well-run
Yeah,
place
that's a key indicator.
in that building. Though we didn't go
Yeah.
inside the sludge cave.
Yeah,
building.
no, it's.
We didn't let you in the headworks. No.
No, we went in the headworks.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. Proper operating wastewater plant, really, the odor should not dominate. It's intrinsic because obviously what's coming through, but if it's dominating, then you're not running your process well. Very good. So we're going to go on to point number 3, and that's the aeration tank repair, the air system upgrade, both engineering and construction upgrade. So the tanks that we currently have, I believe I was looking at the records, they were built in 1971-ish. At least the pictures say 1971. So their 50-year lifespan, which is typical, has been met. And so there's a lot of spalling on the concrete. The gates that allow us to separate tanks from each other are not working very well. The valving is an issue. The main reason for us to do this upgrade is actually the air diffusion system. As a matter of fact, one of the things that kept me from getting here on time, which I apologize, is we currently have what are called blower systems. They basically pump air into these tanks for the biological treatment that takes place. But even though the blowers were upgraded, the piping distribution was not. So we really needed a piping system for each individual blower. So what happens when it gets hot is that these blowers are trying to pump air through these inefficient, pipe diffusion systems. They're trying to overcome the fact that they weren't designed for them, and they heat up. And so right before I came, the blower failed 4 times. And so we had to, get ventilation into the building, open up roof hatches so that they would cool down. So that's what happens when you upgrade one, but not the rest of it. So this air system would allow us to have, pretty much a piping air diffusion system for each blower, allowing us to ramp up as needed in the summer. And the other thing would be to install what is called a fine bubble diffusion. Currently, we have coarse bubble diffusion. It's not efficient at all. It's old technology. Fine diffusion allows us the transmission and the saturation of air with great efficacy and lower electrical costs. It's best practice throughout the industry, so we're simply trying to catch up in that regard. So that's what relates to this aeration tanks repair. And if you have any questions on this.
And I'm glad some of you got to see this, because it really is an amazing process and facility.
Yeah, Greg was asking, and I was on vacation, by the way. I wasn't there, but he was asking, what did you guys think? I don't know, for the ones that went, did you enjoy it?
I very much enjoyed it.
We have an opening.
Is that a conflict of interest?
It is.
By the way,
I'm just
Greg,
joking.
Greg is a consummate professional, and he is very passionate about his work. So it's going to make him very happy to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you for sharing.
Sorry, I just want to say, look, when I did the tour of the wastewater treatment plant and then the water treatment plant on Saturday, and when I go home and I talk to my family about it, they are so excited about it. And my wife is like, "Why don't the kids go on, the school kids go on tours of these things? Because it's science as well.
Absolutely.
We should totally do that because it's really, it's
We're up
actually
for
really
it.
fascinating."
Yeah, we're up for it, so
I don't know if
we'll
there's
jot that
liability
down.
issues, but
No, we
Yeah,
do,
of course.
like we do that with the police. We have, was it the kindergartners?
My kids do it, too, in Marlboro.
Yeah, so they do police and fire. That's a great idea.
Yeah, like the environmental science class,
Yeah, cool.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Dave.
So, in summary, this plan for the fire department has $10.4 million. For road reconstruction, it's $1.9 million. For the highway and city lots, it's $3.2 million. This is over the 5 years. Parks and recreation, it's $8.4 million. Police is $1 million. Water is $5.4 million, and sewer is $4.5 million, for a total of $35 million over 5 years. So it's a pretty robust plan, and so it's just something to think about in concept when you're looking at this. Obviously, we'll come back and we'll create the funding plan for the 2023 year. The other piece that we do have to do is we have to publish it and have a public meeting. And we can also discuss any changes you'd like to see here, and then like to adopt it in July.
What drives that July deadline? Is that
The charter.
The charter.
The charter does, okay.
I know, you're good.
Yeah, so that's in the charter, and we should be doing that every year.
Mhm. So, looking at the totals by year, we have a spike in 2024,
Yes.
and then we drop off to only $1 million in 2026. And I think
Right.
that's really because 26 and 27, we haven't put in a lot of the public works stuff that would, like, there's work that needs to be done on
Right.
assessing what
Right.
those costs would be like, right?
Yes, so
And-
both in water and sewer, we mostly focused on those first 3 years.
Right, right.
And some of those costs, as we present the 5-year capital plan next year, we may reprioritize, and some of the amounts in 2024 and 2025 may be in 2026 and 2027.
And we may make adjustments too, once, the big projects are Fishkill, Teller Avenue, most of that was already funded and is reimbursable, but then we have the firehouse too. And I do appreciate the flexibility of our departments. They have a list of things that they need all of the time, and they all understood that it was in the context of us having to make a major investment in the fire department. So they don't talk to Gary anymore at the department head meetings, but they were all very flexible. And I really feel like the quality of the work that we got this year was great. And that's, Sue leading it and the department heads responding and really doing their homework.
Yeah,
Well
I
done.
got one question. The only department where I only saw the 1 year was the road construction. I assume we're going to try to be doing something each year, or do I have that wrong?
We'll still be doing the milling and paving, and generally that's CHIPS funded. But as for any major reconstruction, Mickey, we don't have any.
But most of what you think is road reconstruction is milling and paving. And so we get an annual allocation for the Consolidated Highway Program, or called CHIPS. And that actually is going to go up because of some of the state legislation that's going through. We do about 8 or 10 roads a year, depending on how far we can get. 10 or 12.
Right.
So since Mickey wasn't at the mic for people at home, he's saying that he doesn't know what our CHIPS allocation is yet. We're going to try to do 10 or 12 roads, and we'll really determine that final list once we know what's available and then how much it will cost to do that.
What does CHIP stand for, please?
Consolidated Highway Program funding.
Thank you.
So we're generally doing about $300,000 to $400,000 of that a year. So, it's saving the roads before we have to reconstruct it.
Yeah, this really long-term helps us not have to rebuild. We just rebuilt one of our roads too using emergency funds. The Pocket Road had washed out, and we did about a $50,000 to $60,000 rebuild of that. That was fully funded by FEMA and the state. And you'll see when we rebuilt that to a much stronger road than it was previously, so that it won't wash out again, or we hope it won't.
I think overall, the one question that I have or thing that I'm not sure about is the infrastructure around broadband or internet. And I believe that conversation left off with us waiting for the county to do a survey and potentially have a plan. And if that's what we're doing and that's what our plan is, then I'm fine with that. But just wanted to bring that up in this workshop.
I would like to have that conversation outside of this. If you want to do broadband, then we're going to have a real conversation about prioritization and capacity. I mean, it's one thing to do broadband at one discrete site, like at the park. I know I've heard other things that would basically have us be a broadband company, and then there's a whole spectrum in between. So I would welcome a conversation to understand that, because I wouldn't even know what to put on this. The county's study has not been finalized, as far as I know. I know we had publicized people responding on it, and I have not seen a subsequent announcement that plan was finalized.
That makes sense.
All right, and while we have Ed here, if we're done with, are there any other questions on capital?
Thank you.
So Ed is here to talk about, Ed and Nick have been working on a local law related to a capital program item which would replace all of our meters. We have about 4,500 meters, water meters, that measure how much water a household or business uses, and then we bill them based on that. And we're looking to upgrade that. So Ed, can you talk about that? And everybody's dismissed. Thank you, except for Teresa. All right, thank you. Thanks a lot.
So in 2019, our vendor, Core and Main, who provides us our water meters, they approached us about a new program, an upgrade to our existing water meter infrastructure. Currently, our water meters are two components, basically. There's the water meter that the water passes through, and that's attached to what's called an MXU, which is the radio portion, where every 3 months we drive around. We have a special van that has this equipment in it that reads the meters, and it gets uploaded here to City Hall, and our billing department processes the bills. This new infrastructure actually replaces the MXUs. It's pretty much going like from AM to FM. It's a much stronger signal. They communicate via like an antenna to two sites that then communicate back to City Hall. It's in the industry, it's known as AMI, Advanced Metering Infrastructure. The highlights of this is the fact that it's live reads, whereas the current system is like every 3 months reads. So the only way we would ever know what would be going on is we'd have to do reads every single day and then process that information. This new system, the MXU, for the most part, is what's going to be changed. There are some of the meters that throughout the city, some of the very, very old, the older operating ones that have some of the mechanical systems in it, they'll be changed out. But the largest portion of this program is the MXU, the radio portion, and then software upgrades, where the software, it becomes instead of a fixed base like we have now, we have our drivable system, fixed base, here to billing, fixed base, it becomes a cloud system. And the biggest, to me, one of the most exciting things that we add to this program is a customer portal. So as a resident property owner, you'll be able to log in and see your own usage. And on our end, the system, it's again a smart system where it'll actually, we can program to tell us whatever we really want. There's over, I believe, Chris, there was like 30 some odd alarms.
Yeah.
That it'll, like, every Monday morning, hey, this is what's going on in your system. And then, you know, some of it is just, will be, hey, it's a zero read, zero stoppage. Well, the house is for sale. The house is vacant. Or, hey, this meter is running backwards now. So somebody actually physically went in and spun it. And
Which
yes,
has happened.
That's happened, yes. So this is, the law is going to help us facilitate this upgrade because, as you know, as the water meter is located in the property along with the MXU. So the only way for us to actively pursue this project is to really gain access to the property to switch out these MXUs, but also in the future, or as we continue to go along, as the meter fails or we need to investigate, it actually help facilitate earlier access because there's many residents, I know Sue just checked out. The last time the city did this, a meter upgrade, I believe was almost maybe 15 to 20 years ago. We still have residents that still have never responded from the first go around. So that's where the meat of this law change comes in. There's been several communities here around us that have already undertaken this capital project. Town of Fishkill, New Windsor, Town of Poughkeepsie, City of Poughkeepsie. There's what was the other one? Peekskill. So there's been some large municipalities around us that have all taken, I've already done this program. And one of the biggest things that they've all said is you need a law behind this program to facilitate it or you'll never get it complete.
And you all have seen emails from people who receive large bills unexpectedly, and you know how difficult that is. And it's difficult for us too because the water has passed through the meter, but nobody was watching it in real time. So they find out 2 months later when they get a $2,500 bill when they usually had a $100 bill. What this allows us to do is actually have an alarm that says, hey, the usage has spiked radically at this property, and we can call and we can say, we think you have a leak or something going on. And we did this, there was a church that had a leak, and luckily one of our clerks saw the spike before it got too out of hand and called them and saved them thousands of dollars. That's what this system would allow us to do. And then you can also go on and monitor your own usage, so you can see, like, hey, what time of day am I using a lot of water? The other alarm you could have is you see spikes in usage throughout the day. That's normal. During the night, you're using a lot less water. If we see a high level of water consumption going straight through the day, again, it tells us there's probably a leak, and somebody's paying for water that they're really not using for.
Yeah, especially like this winter, we had multiple frozen houses where pipes burst, and it was just created a constant, like the system is smart enough, we'll say you've had consistent running water for however many hours.
Something's going on.
That something's going on, you need to look into it.
And so when the project has already been authorized on the capital program, we would like to set up a contract to move forward, but in order to have an efficient deployment of the new meters, we need to be able to get into people's houses. Now, most people are very cool about it. They're like, yeah, this is going to help me, but we have a handful of people that just won't respond. And what this does is it just sends them a note by, okay, you're going to get hit with $250 bill, and you'll have 3 notices, and then if you don't let us in, you're going to get hit with that bill. We actually went back and forth on whether that should be more, and we went on with the $250. And again, the goal is not to fine people. The goal is to have compliance so that we can change out the meters. This is needed on a regular basis too, because meters break, and we need to be able to get in and change those meters out. So
I'm sorry, in the MXU portion again, which was the primary part of this capital program, they have a 20-year battery to them. So 15 years, it's 100% replacement at no cost to the city, and then after that, there's a 5-year prorated cost. And just as you know, as our meter department staff go out to do some of the meter calls and replace the current MXUs, we're already, very on a small scale, already doing this. So any of the new MXUs that are going on for communication purposes are already these newer style communicators.
This also helps us move we have a person that's dedicated almost half-time to doing this, and instead of them driving around in a truck reading meters, those readings would just come into City Hall, and then that position could be more for maintenance and other things.
And one of the it seems like very minor, but on an efficiency scale, as if a property is sold, there's a final water read, so it's for transfer of ownership of the bill. So the information request comes into our billing department. The billing department then requests us, and then we go out and do the read. Where now billing will be able to just sit there and press a button, and it shall have the read instantly. They did a live demo with myself and Chris and Susan. They did an entire municipality. I don't remember which one it was off the top of my head. New Windsor. It took all of 30 seconds to get every read in New Windsor. It was very impressive to watch it live.
I think if it's, and you said that residents can access day-to-day information.
Yes.
Right, and this would be through the city website, or?
No, they get their own portal.
They get their own portal through it's actually, Census is the manufacturer of our meters, but it would be it's through them that they would set up their customer portal.
Well, I'm just thinking of this new system as an opportunity also to empower residents to monitor their own usage.
Absolutely.
And it's good for everybody to use less, right? So, I mean, that well 8, it would be great to buy a lot less from it, right? And if everybody uses less water, we can, right?
Yes.
Like the only way to really get water usage down is for people to see the day-to-day impact, like the day-to-day usage, I think.
Yeah, and see how it moves. Like, what did I do that made this spike? Oh, I watered the garden, or I filled a pool.
Right.
And they don't realize how much that actually drives up the use. Or they have a toilet that's running. We've had people that have had amazing bills just because the back of the toilet's running. And
Happened to me.
yeah.
What's the cost to each consumer for the replacement of this meter? Has that been figured out yet?
I don't. I'd have to break that out for you, so I apologize. I have the total. We have the total cost, but I don't have a per, like how it would reflect.
But I assume that.
But it's
Cost
not
to the
charged
city.
to the
It's not
house.
charged.
It's
to-
not-
It's about
charged to the house.
$330 a unit, if
And
memory
it's-
serves.
I believe so. Yeah, I don't have that in front
$328
of
or
me.
something.
And that is charged to individual houses or no?
No, we're paying for it
No.
through the
Okay.
water fees. So again, like, because it's a 20-year investment, we're doing it over the years as a capital item. And basically, the fees that people pay for water go to help pay and offset the bond that we use for this. So the city's paying for the upgrade, but over time, that will be absorbed through the fees.
And we've done all the preliminary work. They came and they did an entire survey of the city. They know the area of coverage. They've already laid out the antenna locations for communication purposes. So we're in a comfortable spot to move this forward.
Yeah, it says in the draft of the law under section 21915, the city will supply meters at the expense of the builder owner of each property as set forth in the City of Beacon fee schedule.
That's during, like, if you were to require like a new purchase, like if you.
Oh, so a new construction?
Yes.
Oh, okay. But not for existing?
No, typically for
Meters.
existing, it's just, I don't want to say just, but
Okay.
typically for existing, it's there's inside the meter, we had one recently over on Center Street, during some construction on Center Street, the screen got clogged up with dirt. It was just a simple cleaning. We took the screen out, replaced the screen, put a new chamber in. It was no expense to the property owner.
And Nick, did you have anything to add? Because I know you and Drew did quite a bit of research on this, and
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. No, we've worked with Ed on this, and the law reflects what I think we both think, based upon other municipalities' experiences, empowers the city to be able to come up with a program that will allow it to enforce against those who don't cooperate. We've also, in terms of installing new meters, we've also strengthened the language with regard to enforcement against individuals who might tamper with the meter. And we've added some additional language regarding procedures the city will follow if someone's meter has been turned off and or for tampering with the meters. The only other point I would add is that when we do have these large unexpected bills due to a water pipe leak past the meter, the municipality, the city doesn't have the authority to waive those because it's, under the law, it's assumed that that water was used and consumed because it's past the meter. So even if it's broken, it would be a gift of public funds if the city were to not charge for that water because the city spent money to produce and filter that water and treat it, so it has to be charged. So having these smart meters is also just another way for people to conserve water and be on top of when the pipe might break. Other than that, this just needs to be set down for a public hearing, which you would schedule at your next council meeting on Monday.
And then, Ed, if we were to pass this, what's your outlook for implementation?
I believe it was about 18 months total.
Does it meter sewer as well?
No, your sewer bill is a percentage of your water bill.
Oh, I see, okay. All right. I was wondering how that was metered.
Yeah.
It's basically like some water you'll drink, and and not all gets passed through. Some water you'll use for like watering your plants. So it's just a percentage. I don't say again but it's a percentage of your water bill.
Do you know yet, as the public might be listening in, like what the general approach would be to setting up a time to gain access to property in order to replace the meters?
Our vendor, the entire project is turnkey. So once we authorize them to begin this project, they send out mailings to the residents based on our property owner list. They'll send out mailings, and it's by the third attempt if they don't respond after the third attempt, that's when the penalty will kick in. Just to let everybody know, I live in a county district, and the county did the same thing, and their penalty was much steeper. I believe it was $500 a month if you didn't respond by the third attempt.
And this penalty is $250 one-shot deal? So if they, or is it?
No, it would be a continuation, George. So if you don't respond after the third attempt, and the next billing cycle, and the next billing cycle, and the next billing cycle.
And, it says on each
that's
and every
quarterly
water bill.
billing cycle. So
we got to overemphasize that everybody needs to open their mail to people who don't open their mail.
Yeah, I was wondering if it sounds like it's coming from a third party.
Yeah.
I could see people just ignoring it if it doesn't say City of Beacon, if it's an option with this third party to put something that makes it look like City of Beacon.
I don't have the letterhead with me, but I believe it's almost
I think it does go on our letterhead.
Okay, it does look like, that would be, maybe a potential concern.
And then they would arrange times to get in. It's, again, they've done this, so we haven't heard complaints from the other
Right.
municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the compliance is really high, and it's just a handful of people. It's kind of like paying your property taxes. Like, generally people do it, and there's usually just a small number, thank goodness. And we try to avoid having these penalties. Our goal is not to have the penalty. Our goal is to have a better service.
The other thing too is even once this gets completed, there's still going to be issues. Either a no read, stop read. The wire that connects the meter to the MXU, it's very thin. It's just as thin as telephone wire. There's not much to it. We've had just a simple thing where like somebody was in their basement, they hit the wire, it comes disconnected. So, and just to get back access into the property, just to make sure you get proper connection, you get the read going again. Some of the very minor things, just sometimes people don't respond to. But then there's those, like Chris said, there's the outliers, the small percentage that don't respond, this very, very small percentage that try flipping the meter backwards, and then,
Or disconnect it.
Or disconnect
and bypass it.
bypass it. So there's those actions as well. So, but we do believe that we'll have a very, very quick response from the residents and the property owners.
And again, like if they inadvertently do something that triggers it to fail, we end up charging them more because you basically do an equation of like the highest usage in a certain amount of time, and then you double it. So it could be well beyond what they used. And rather than fighting with people about why was your bill this high, we'd rather just have this real-time data about what you used and be able to warn them if we see something blowing up.
Yeah, just think about what happened on Verplank Avenue this year. We would have known like instant, like that
Pipes
day,
froze.
pipe burst,
Or-
significant damage to the property. We could have been there as quickly, hopefully limited as much damage as we could, and then shut the water off externally. It's those type of events that are also very positive about this program.
This might be an edge case, but there we have renters and landlords who don't necessarily live here, and landlords are supposed to have someone who's taking care, but they may or may not have that. And I see there's the possibility of discontinuing water services for non-compliance. I just wanted to understand if that's something that we would use,
typically,
knowing
no.
that some renters.
We'd more
We'd
fine the
We
landlord.
would more fine the landlord than
Yeah.
ever disconnect the water. In my 8 years, we've never, the only water we've ever disconnected is an abandoned house or properties that the city's taken over. Like, we'd rather work with you than ever get down that road.
And
Yeah.
I don't think legally you can turn it off.
No, I was gonna say, I
100%.
think
You can
there's the
turn it
right to
off, so it's
water.
really hard to take a shower.
Yeah.
But you still have basic water to take prescription drugs.
Yeah, I thought there I saw right to hot water, but I couldn't tell if that was a New York State or New York City law.
But it doesn't say how much.
I just wanted to make sure we're not
But
putting something in our law that.
We want to work with people just to get it done.
We did, myself and Nick and Drew did discuss that. We felt it's in pretty much every other municipal law, so we felt comfortable.
So it's
leaving it.
put in there, but not intending to.
Yeah, but not
to use it.
no immediate intent to use it.
All right.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, you had a busy night, Ed.
I just, not to go back into the rabbit hole, but I just want to
Get out of the rabbit hole now.
No, I just want, next few weeks I'll be in Randall's Island. If anybody's never been down there before, it's quite an impressive complex that they built. There's from a fire training center to a massive tennis academy to the rest of the island is sports field, and they have. Just to touch on the conversation that Paloma brought up, some of the most impressive public bathrooms I've ever seen. And if
Take some pictures.
that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. I was
Milling
down there.
around.
Ed, you were doing so well
I know.
right up
I
until
just,
about 10 seconds ago. All
But
right.
thank you, everybody.
Someone
Have a
cut
good
his mic. Pete, cut the mic.
Thank you, Ed.
We'll take it out of the water fund. Okay.
So we are number 5?
Yeah, number 5, and Nick is going to lead this one.
Okay. It's a discussion regarding video conferencing for the members of the city council. Nick?
Thank you. So about 3 weeks ago, we previously discussed this at a workshop. This is a proposed local law that the city council would adopt that applies just to the city council, and it's would be adopted pursuant to an amendment to the New York State law that in part allows virtual meetings. It's not the same procedures and same liberal requirements you have now with respect to virtual meeting attendance under the executive order. As you may recall, this is a bit more limited, only 3 members of the council. You cannot have a majority of the council attending a meeting virtually. Additionally, this does allow for virtual attendance only in limited circumstances where there's a hardship that's created, and that has to be set forth in the policy, which is attached to the local law and part of your agenda for tonight's discussion. And additionally, if you choose to attend a meeting virtually pursuant to this provision of the law, you do not need to require or allow the public to come in and attend from that location. So that's the benefit of this provision. It also doesn't require 72 hours advance notice, which another provision of the Open Meetings Law would require you to attend it virtually. When we last discussed this local law, the question the council had was the transcript requirement. The definition of transcript is not defined in the law. The law requires that if a member, even if one, attends via this provision, a transcript of the meeting needs to be maintained and provided. And Chris, I understand you had taken a look at what those costs would be, and the concern we had was the law didn't define what transcript is, and that's still an open questions and discussions with the New York State Committee on Open Government. Their understanding, interpretation, and advice is that the council just needs to provide a transcript. It's not a verbatim transcript, it's not a stenographer's transcript, and the transcript that can be produced via an electronic means should be sufficient.
And we can do that at fairly low cost with the AI applications that are out there. And you know, my hope is it wouldn't be utilized a lot, because there is some time. I mean, we have to do a little bit of a quality check on it.
And it's only for meetings where there's someone online.
Correct.
Right?
And where it's requested.
Yes. Those two conditions need to exist for us to be forced to do a transcript.
And also only for meetings, not for workshops, right?
No, it would be for workshops as well, because they're considered meetings.
Oh, okay.
So anytime there's a majority of a council meeting to conduct city business. And it's not for every virtual meeting, so if it's a virtual meeting under an executive order,
Right.
you're attending a virtual meeting where you are allowing the public to attend and you give 72 hours advance notice, that does not require a transcript. It's just if you're attending under this special provision, which we're referring to as section 103-A, that a transcript would be required.
So again, I think that's, you might not have heard, but Dan just said, it's the meetings that use this piece of the law
Yes.
only. So a regular meeting would just be, if everybody's here, there's no concern.
So if we pass this, if somebody requested tonight's meeting, for example, since Lee is, the transcript of tonight's meeting, since our mayor is on virtual, we wouldn't have to provide that because it's not under this provision.
No, this meeting would be under the provision. The exception would be, say the mayor, we had published where he would be 72 hours before the meeting, and we were saying he'll be at the Starbucks in, you know, whatever town. But again, it wouldn't be
So
that.
they can go back as far as any of the meetings that?
No, it would be once the local law is passed.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, if they wanted tonight, May 31st's meeting's transcript, that we wouldn't have
You
to
don't,
provide
no,
it.
we wouldn't have to.
Exactly.
But like if the law was already in place, this would be a meeting that we would have to provide the transcript if requested.
Yeah.
And we think we can balance the need to continue to have these hybrid meetings and that option with the, a little additional burden of the transcript.
So the next step would be to schedule a public hearing on the local law.
All right. So we'll bring that to council next week. The next one is also Nick.
Yeah. Nick, could you bring us through the next one, the tax
Certainly.
issues?
So we're bringing to you two proposed tax certiorari settlements that have been negotiated with Kathy Martin, your assessor, and Justin Siebert in my office, who handles the tax certs. The information is in your packet. I'll briefly describe it. Concerns two properties, and I wrote down my notes and now have.
And just for background and for the public, a tax certiorari is when someone challenges the assessed value of their property on which their property taxes are based. And there might be some condition that we weren't aware of or something unique about the property. And generally, we were able to settle these. They don't.
And so these two ones before you tonight pertain to the 2021 assessment. And the first one is the property owned by the Four Daughters Corporation located at 121-123 Roundabout, which is a mixed-use commercial and residential property. The 2021 assessment was $3 million, and the proposed settlement is a reduction of $120,000 to a new assessed value of $2,880,000, which results in a refund by the city of $1,422. Kathy and Judson felt that based upon the documentation provided by the property owner, this was an appropriate reduction. The property owner was seeking more, but could not substantiate it to the satisfaction of your assessor. The second assessment that's being discussed tonight is property owned by Stellar Kids, which is located at 375-389 Main Street. That's the building that the Town Crier Cafe and 4 additional retail buildings is located. They are also challenging their 2021 assessment, which would be, was at $1,358,000. That has been suggested to be reduced by $108,000 to a new assessment of $1,250,000. And a refund there is similar in value at $1,279.80, and there would not be a challenge to the 2022 assessment, which would be assessed at these values that we property owners have agreed are fair and represent the current value. So if you're in agreement, then there would be a resolution on Monday's meeting to authorize the settlement with a refund to 4 daughters for $1,422 and to Stellar Kids for $1,279.80.
And these would be separate resolutions with separate votes.
Sorry, can we go back to the previous discussion? I just wanted to ask a question of Nick about, in the policy itself, there's section E, public participation via video conferencing technology. 2 things. In section 2 particularly, that it talks about participants must use the raise hand function, and it talks about the details of it, which assumes Zoom. And I know that we might be using Zoom for another 25 years, or we might be using Zoom for another 2 years, and so I'm wondering if there's a way to finesse the language to make it a little more evergreen, so we don't have to go back and change it because it's obsolete. For example, I think Ben currently shares how people engage, so if there's a way to make the language more about, follow the instructions provided in the virtual meeting if you want to participate, just so we don't have to go back and edit language because all of a sudden Zoom has been taken over by something else. And just in number 3, there's a small typo. The mayor in that first sentence has an F at the end. I just wanted to bring it up now so we didn't take up time at the public meeting.
Thank you. We'll correct the typo in number 3. As far as your first comment with respect to the instructions, we did discuss making it more generic, but felt that because this is a policy, can be voted on at a council meeting and changed, doesn't require a public hearing. And we thought having it in writing with respect to these instructions in this policy would be helpful to the public to give them that guidance, as it would be a document living on your website. Certainly, it's however council wants to have it in the policy.
And this law sunsets at a point, Nick, right? This authorization from the state?
2024 it is, yes.
Okay, so it's not like something that's going to be out 10 years and...
Okay, that might be fine then. Yeah. Just try not to make more busy work for future council, so.
Yes.
That's it. I have to go back to the tax thing then, I have no comment on the tax thing, just wanted to make sure I got that in.
Thank you.
So I have a question about the tax certiorari.
Certs.
So my Latin, I have to brush up on my Latin. So this, the process that these 2 businesses engaged in was the same process that residents engage in, which is they came to the assessment board with a grievance and went through that process?
This is a little different because they went through the same process initially, but then when they did not receive what they perceived to be a satisfactory result, they filed an Article 7 proceeding in Dutchess County Supreme Court. So they commenced legal action, but they do start with the same process of filing a tax grievance and appearing before the Board of Assessment Review. And in both cases, the Board of Assessment Review denied their request.
And homeowners have that ability as well.
Sure, but I can't
Well,
afford a
actually,
lawyer
there's
to
a-
argue my assessment, But if I owned a block of
residents
Beacon, maybe I could.
Now, residents have 2 different ways they could proceed. They could file a similar tax certiorari proceeding. There's also a small claims proceeding, which is a bit more expedited for residences.
Thanks.
All right.
Ready for the last one?
I'm ready for the last one.
Okay, this is authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with the County of Dutchess for reimbursement for short-term rental monitoring.
So we are going to bring 2 resolutions, if you're open to it, next week. The first is to do an intermunicipal agreement with Dutchess County whereby they reimburse us for $5,000 a year for the cost of short-term rental host compliance software. And then we would bring a contract with the vendor that they have done a contract with, and we'd actually be piggybacking on that contract. And that's with Granicus. The software that they offer monitors almost 100 different sites. We know principally 4 or 5, but there are a lot of sites out there in which you can list a a short-term rental. They monitor all of them, and for $6,500 a year, Granicus will provide 2 modules of their services. The first is giving us addresses for all of the STRs located in Beacon. We think right now there are 107 discrete properties that are being listed on a regular basis. The second thing they'll do, the second module that the county will reimburse us for that we wanted to take on is the compliance module. So we'll basically have this tool that our building department will see who is on this list. If they're not registered, and remember we have 11 registrations, 11 permitted units, it gives them an ever-increasing group of options for sending letters. So there's a warning letter, there's a second letter, there's a enforcement action, and again, I don't know that we get to 100%, but right now we're at less than 10. We're at about 10% compliance. This will pay for itself if we simply add 10 units a year to the permitted system, which costs $150 for the 2 years, and it has an inspection that goes with it. It also can help us figure out if properties that are that are not the primary residence of the person renting them out. For instance, somebody just bought a house to Airbnb it. It'll help us identify those circumstances. So I talked to the county about it. Nick and I did a call with Granicus to understand how we would interface with that. There would be a training process for our building department. So again, for $6,500 a year, we get back $5,000, and then we would presumably get 10 a year at least. So we think it would pay for itself. It's something we'd like to try. I'm not sure this is the panacea of, dealing with that issue, but I think it's the worthy next step.
I think it's the best option we've heard so far, so let's do it.
Yeah, so I appreciate the county working with us. Like, we had an original estimate from Granicus that was more than $2,000 higher, and I sent them the proposal, and they said, oh no, there's a discount too. So we were getting a discounted rate by piggybacking on Dutchess's contract. And then what we can do is we can assess in a year or two if we want to continue. Let's see what we can do with it.
And do we expect the county support to continue year over year as well?
Their commitment in this intermunicipal agreement, I think, is through 2024, 2025.
Is that right? Okay, great.
Yeah, so again, I would try it for a year. Let's see if we're getting value out of it. And I would judge that as, even if we get 10 new properties that are permitted a year, we've done something,
And I hope it discourages those people who are investing in it solely for Airbnb purposes.
Yet it will be interesting to see how that helps us identify the worst violators. Yeah. And again, I don't think you're going to get everybody, but I think you can get the worst violators. Yeah. We'll see the number of days these things are rented. We'll see their addresses. It will have the listing provided to us, which under our STR law is evidence of breaking of renting out a short-term rental.
Right.
So.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else?
So this will be 2 contracts that we bring to you next week.
I made a note for myself, Chris, but just to say out loud too, that it would be great, you said a year from now, whatever seems the appropriate amount, to have a report back on how it's doing, how many new registers we have, what kinds of things we're catching, any kind of trends there. So I will remind you at a closer date, but just wanted to name that out loud.
I wouldn't want to forget that, Molly. But understand there is going to be a period of ramping up here we'll have to figure out a staff person that can be trained on this. I think I know who I want for that. And then make sure that they have the room in their work schedule to do enough of this to make it worth it. Yeah. Whew.
That's it. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We could have a motion. Wouldn't that fulfill us?
Can I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
Well done.
All in
Mayor.
favor, say.
Aye.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Excellent. Good night.
Have a good night, Lee.
Thank you all.
Can you sign